My name's Julian, I'm 31, and depending on who you ask, I'm either a bartender or something else entirely. My family prefers the first version, especially my dad, Robert. To him, a real man wears a tie, drives a German sedan, and climbs some corporate ladder to nowhere while bragging at every family barbecue about his latest promotion. You know the type. So when I dropped out of college at 22 and started working behind a bar, not as a stopgap, but as a career, he made it clear I was an embarrassment. Not in dramatic, disowning kind of way. No, that would have required effort. He just gradually erased me from the picture, conversations, family photos, even seating charts at holidays. My mom went along with it. My sister, Tessa, she followed their lead. So I stopped showing up to things. That is, until last weekend. Tessa got married. Big, extravagant wedding at some country estate that looked like it was pulled straight out of a royal romance movie. I wasn't invited to the engagement party. I wasn't even told about the bridal shower. But I got a formal invitation to the wedding. Mailed, even. And addressed by Mom. Maybe she felt guilty. Or maybe it was because Grandpa Harold, Dad's dad, the only one who ever gave a damn about me, had threatened not to come unless both of his grandkids were treated equally. So I RSVP'd yes. I didn't rent a tux or show up in a flashy car. Just a tailored black suit, clean shave, and a quiet entrance during cocktail hour. I figured I'd stay on the sidelines, congratulate my sister, and leave before dessert. But life had other plans. The moment I stepped onto the gravel path leading up to the venue's main hall, I heard the tail end of a laugh I recognized too well. Dad's. I walked around the corner and saw him near the bar, talking to a group of distant cousins and one of Tessa's new in-laws. His glass was half raised, his words already slurred. Julian? Oh, you mean the bartender. He snorted, like the word tasted sour. He's probably mixing rum and cokes in some club downtown. He won't last 10 minutes in a place like this. They all laughed. Even Mom. I could have turned around right then. But I didn't. I clenched my jaw, straightened my spine, and kept walking like I hadn't heard a word. My hands were shaking, not from embarrassment, but from restraint. I hadn't seen Dad in over 2 years. And the first words out of his mouth about me were a punchline. The reception hall was huge. Marble floors, vaulted ceilings, chandeliers big enough to crush a smart car. People in designer suits and sequin gowns sipped champagne and laughed like they were born doing it. I stayed on the edge of the room, watching the social machine run smoothly without me. Then the couple made their entrance. Tessa in a pearly white dress, her new husband James in a tailored navy tux. They looked good. She saw me and froze for just a second, surprised. James didn't notice. Not yet. When the introductions and toasts were done, guests mingled again. James and Tessa made their way through the crowd, shaking hands and accepting compliments. When they reached me, Tessa gave a tight smile. Julian, didn't know you were coming. You invited me, I said calmly. Right? She said quickly, glancing away. Then James held out his hand. Nice to meet you. I'm James, I said, shaking it. I know. He grinned, until he didn't. His smile slowly faded as he stared at me. Really stared. His grip loosened. His brow furrowed. Wait, what's your last name again? I tilted my head slightly. Same as hers. He pulled his phone out of his pocket like he was checking a message, but I saw his fingers moving. Typing. Then silence. He looked at the screen. Then at me. Then back again. His face went pale. You know that look when someone realizes they've made a terrible assumption? That was him. He cleared his throat, tucked the phone away like it had burned him, and muttered something about getting a drink. Tessa looked confused. What was that? I shrugged. Now, you're probably wondering what he saw. What made him freeze? Let's back up a second. Yes, I started as a bartender. But what I never told my family, not out of secrecy, just because they never cared to ask, is that I co-founded a craft spirits company 7 years ago. We started small, local, sold to niche bars and boutiques. But then we caught fire. A few viral campaigns, a couple celebrity endorsements, and a big distribution deal later, and our brand exploded. By 29, I'd bought out my partner. By 30, I had licensing deals across 3 continents. My bar job is running a multi-million-dollar operation that employs over 60 people. But none of that ever came up with my family, because none of them ever treated me like a person worth knowing. They'd written their version of me years ago, the failure, the dropout, the cocktail monkey, and they never updated the script. Until now. As the night wore on, Whispers started floating through the room. I saw James whispering to his brother, then to his father, then to a groomsman, who shot me a wide-eyed glance before quickly looking away. Somewhere between the salad and the main course, my dad approached me. "Julian," he said, his tone weirdly measured. "I didn't expect to see you here. You invited me," I said again, expression neutral. Right. He forced a chuckle. "So, still bartending, huh?" I could have let it go. I could have smiled, nodded, kept the peace. But something in me snapped. "I haven't tended bar in 5 years," I said. "But one of my products is behind yours right now," asked the bartender. "The tequila in your glass? That's mine." He blinked. "What?" "I own the company that makes it." He laughed. "It wasn't real." "You're joking." I didn't answer. I just walked past him and up to the bar, where the bartender was stacking used glasses. I waited until he noticed me. "Hey," I said. "You guys using Calyx for the house tequila?" "Yeah," he said, lighting up. "Calyx Blanco. Smooth stuff. You tried it." "I'm the founder," I said quietly. His eyes widened. "No way." I nodded once. "Way." Dad had followed me. He heard every word. Behind me, I could practically feel his worldview cracking like ice under pressure. And that's when things really started to unravel. It didn't take long. I left Dad at the bar and returned to my table. I hadn't even sat down fully before I saw him across the room, whispering urgently into Mom's ear. Her eyes flicked to me, then to the bartender, then back to Dad, and I saw her face go tight with confusion, like a rug had just been yanked out from under her. She stood up straight, smoothed her dress, and started toward me with that passive-aggressive smile she always wore when she was about to pretend nothing was wrong. "Julian," she said as she arrived, brushing invisible lint from my lapel. "What was that little joke you were telling your father?" "No joke," I said flatly. "He asked if I was still bartending." I told him the truth. She blinked at me like I'd spoken in code. "You own that liquor company?" "Calyx." "Yes. But you never told us." "You never asked," I said simply. Her lips thinned. I could see her trying to calculate how to walk this back. She glanced around, noticing the subtle looks being thrown our way now. Cousins, friends, Tessa's new in-laws. They'd caught on that something was happening, even if they didn't know what. And gossip moves fast in a room full of bored people in formal wear. Especially when the black sheep turns out to be something other than sheep. Mom leaned in closer, her voice a whisper now. "You know your father doesn't like being made a fool." I looked her straight in the eye. Then he should stop assuming he's the smartest person in every room. She recoiled slightly, like I'd slapped her with words. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Instead, she turned on her heel and walked briskly back to Dad, whose face was turning red, not from the alcohol this time. And then, like some badly timed sitcom punchline, Tessa walked up. She stood beside me, arms crossed, looking every inch the composed bride except for the storm brewing behind her eyes. "Can I ask what's going on?" she said, voice sharp. "James told me you own some company." He didn't give details, just said it was a big deal. I nodded slowly. "Calyx Spirits. We supply to several national chains. You've probably seen the ads." "Wait," she blinked. "You're that Calyx? That's your brand." "Since the beginning." Her mouth opened slightly. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" I stared at her, trying not to let years of resentment bubble over. "Tessa, I wasn't even invited to your engagement party. You never text me unless it's a forwarded family photo. And last Christmas, you posted a picture captioned, 'The whole fam together again.' And I wasn't even in it." She flushed. I didn't mean anything by that." "Sure," I said, voice soft. "But that's the point. None of you ever meant anything by it. That's just how it always was." She didn't respond. Just stood there in her overpriced wedding gown, suddenly unsure of which side of the social dynamic she stood on. And right then, James returned. He was pale again, holding his phone like it had started bleeding. He said to Tessa, glancing at me like I might evaporate. "Can we talk?" She frowned. "What's wrong?" He looked at me again, then leaned in and whispered something into her ear. I couldn't hear it, but I saw her expression change. Her jaw dropped. Her eyes darted to me, back to him, and then down at the phone he held up. Then she slowly turned back to me. "You're on Forbes?" she asked, her voice cracking halfway through the sentence. I nodded. "Made the 30 under 30-foot list 2 years ago. There's a video too." James looked like he wanted to melt into the floor. I didn't know who you were when I shook your hand. I thought you were just a bartender." I offered. He nodded awkwardly. Sorry. That's when the rest of the room started catching up. I saw a bridesmaid whisper to a groomsman. A cousin pulled out his phone. Then another. And another. I watched as one of them tapped through images and suddenly froze, eyes wide. He turned the phone around to show someone else. My name. My photo. An article headline. The bartender who built a liquor empire. And just like that, I wasn't invisible anymore. People started approaching. A few politely at first, soft congratulations, questions about how I built the business, whether I was expanding internationally. Then the opportunists came. Cousins I hadn't seen in years. Aunt Meredith, who once told me I was wasting my potential. Even Uncle Greg, who'd laughed the loudest when Dad called me a failure, now shaking my hand like we were old pals. It was like I'd stepped into an alternate reality. But the best part? The face Dad made as he watched it all unfold from the edge of the room. He looked like a man watching his own movie, except he was no longer the protagonist. He wasn't even in the scene. Mom kept trying to whisper things in his ear, but he waved her off, too stunned to form a coherent sentence. His glass was full again. He wasn't drinking it. I didn't approach him. I didn't need to. Instead, I answered a few more polite questions, offered a quiet goodbye to Tessa, and slipped out just before the cake cutting. I didn't need to stay. My presence had already done what it needed to. But what happened after I left? That's the part that really stings, for them, anyway. I didn't expect what came next. Honestly, I thought I'd made my exit clean. I wasn't looking for some dramatic showdown or a mic drop moment. I just wanted them to see me, really see me, for once in their lives. Not the dropout. Not the family disappointment. Just me. But it turns out, you can't just drop a truth bomb like that into a room full of egos and expect the dust to settle quietly. The next morning, I woke up to 10 missed calls from an unknown number. I figured it was a telemarketer until I checked the voicemail. It was James. Hey, Julian. It's James. Sorry to call so early. I think we should talk. It's about your dad. I sat up in bed. The next message came a few minutes later. His voice was quieter this time. Listen, I know things were weird last night, but something happened after you left. Your mom and dad, they kind of blew up. Like, in front of everyone. I didn't want to say anything until we could speak. Can you call me back? I didn't. Not right away. Instead, I pulled up social media. And there it was. A short, shaky video, no more than 20 seconds, posted by one of Tessa's friends. You could barely hear over the music, but the captions told the story. Father of the bride loses it during speech, storms out mid-reception. The comments were brutal. Apparently, sometime after I left, my dad had tried to give a toast. The kind he used to deliver at every family gathering, back when he still saw himself as the head of the table. But this one didn't land the same. Not with whispers flying around the room. Not with half the guests now Googling me under the table. One comment read, he started saying how proud he was of Tessa for marrying into such a promising family. Then someone, I think the groom's cousin, asked why he never mentioned his successful son. The guy turned red and just walked off mid-sentence. Another, heard someone say, at least the bartender made Forbes. I thought he was going to throw a chair. I couldn't help it. I laughed. Not because I was petty, though, okay, maybe a little, but because for the first time, the narrative wasn't his to control. He couldn't bury me under his disapproval anymore. I'd outgrown the hole. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Tessa. Tessa, did you really have to humiliate him like that? I stared at it for a minute, then typed back. Me. I didn't humiliate him. I answered a question. The truth did the rest. She didn't reply. That same afternoon, I got an unexpected visitor. Grandpa Harold. Now, Grandpa has always been quiet, a man of few but weighty words. When I opened the door and saw him standing there with a paper bag and a tired smile, I stepped aside without saying a word. We sat in my kitchen. He pulled out a bottle, one of mine, and 2 glasses. I figured if I'm drinking your tequila, I should do it with the man who made it, he said. I smiled. I thought you didn't drink anymore. I make exceptions when my family finally gives me something to toast to. We sipped in silence for a moment before he leaned back in his chair. I saw what happened last night. Your father, he's not used to being second place. And he sure as hell isn't used to being wrong. I nodded slowly. He always wanted to be the loudest voice in the room. And now he isn't, Grandpa said. You didn't need to raise your voice. You just showed up. He looked at me with those clear, steady eyes of his. You did good, kid. That meant more to me than any apology from Dad ever could. But the fallout wasn't done. Later that week, a cousin I barely spoke to, Lisa, messaged me. She wanted to catch up, said she was thinking about switching careers and had always admired my work ethic. A day later, Uncle Greg emailed me a business proposal. No joke. Said he had a great idea for a luxury gin line and wanted to collaborate. I ignored both. But the real twist came Friday. I got a certified letter. At first, I thought it was legal. Maybe Dad trying to pull some stunt. But no, it was from James. A formal, handwritten letter. He wanted to meet. Privately. No Tessa. No family. Just the two of us. And he made it clear in the letter. There's something you deserve to know. About your family. And your father. I read that line 3 times. Because up until that point, I thought the only thing I deserved was an apology they'd never give. But maybe, just maybe, there was more. Something hidden. Something they didn't want me to find out. And suddenly, the story wasn't over. It was just beginning. I didn't rush into that meeting with James. I let a few days pass. Partly because I wasn't sure I wanted to know what he was holding on to, and partly because I needed time to think. After everything that had happened, the wedding, the whispers, the flood of fake smiles and sudden interest, I wasn't sure if I was ready to dig any deeper into the family I'd spent a decade keeping at arm's length. But eventually, curiosity won. I texted him a time and place. A small coffee shop in the city, the kind of place where nobody would recognize us and no one would eavesdrop. James was already there when I arrived. Still in a crisp blazer, hair neat, posture straight. He stood when he saw me and offered a cautious smile, like he wasn't sure which version of me would show up, the quiet disappointment, or the man whose name had made headlines that week. I sat down across from him and didn't waste time. What do you want to tell me? He hesitated, glanced around, then leaned in like we were trading secrets in a spy film. Your dad, he said, wasn't just trashing you at the wedding. He's been doing it for years. I raised an eyebrow. Yeah, I figured that much. No, Julian, he said, lowering his voice. He's been deliberately lying. To everyone. Me, my family, Tessa, even your own extended family. We thought you were barely scraping by. Like you were working odd jobs, living in some dingy apartment above a dive bar. I felt my jaw tighten. And you all just believed him? He didn't flinch. Yes, because he said it with conviction. And because every time your name came up, he'd change the subject, or laugh, or tell some story about how you couldn't hold a job, or never finished anything you started. That part wasn't new, but it still hit like a slap. James continued, but after I looked you up, after I realized who you actually were, I asked Tessa if she knew. She didn't. She was floored. And when she asked your parents, well, he took a breath. Robert didn't deny it. He just said, he's not like the rest of us. I had to protect the family from his failure. I stared at him. Protect the family? I repeated. From me. James nodded. It was insane. He acted like you were some stain on their legacy. But the truth is, I think he knew how big you were becoming. I think he knew before we did. And he couldn't stand it. I sat back in my chair, the words tumbling around in my head. All those years, I'd assumed they just didn't care. But they did, just not in the way I'd hoped. Dad had been actively rewriting my story behind my back, turning me into a cautionary tale to make himself look better. A failed son. A disappointment to be pitted, not celebrated. James slid something across the table. A manila envelope. What's this? I asked. Proof, he said. Emails. Messages. Even one where your mom told my mom you were working at a rundown bar near Skid Row. That was just last year. She actually said you were one missed paycheck away from asking for help. I opened the envelope slowly, pulling out a stack of printed emails and screenshots. I skimmed through them, each one more ridiculous than the last. Flat-out lies. Fabrications. Some even included photos of me from years ago. One of me in a dingy t-shirt during a distillery install, another where I was behind a bar, smiling for a promotional shoot, used as evidence of how badly I was doing. I figured you should see them, James said. I didn't know how else to make this right. I looked up. Why are you doing this? He shrugged, shame in his eyes. Because I'm married into this family. And I didn't realize how much rot was hiding under the surface. And because I saw your face at the wedding, and realized I've never seen someone look so calm, while everyone else scrambled to catch up. I stared at the papers again, then folded them back into the envelope. Thanks, I said quietly. I'll hold on to this. We said goodbye. No handshake this time, just a nod. And when I stepped out into the sunlight, I felt strange. Not angry, not even surprised. Just clear. Like the final puzzle piece had dropped into place. I didn't go home right away. Instead, I drove out to the suburbs. Back to the house I hadn't stepped foot in for years. The house where I'd grown up, been told who to be, and eventually discarded like a failed experiment. Mom's car was in the driveway. So was Dad's. I rang the doorbell. Mom answered, wearing her usual polished smile. The kind she used to welcome church friends or neighbors she secretly gossiped about. The moment she saw me, the smile faltered. "Julian," she said, voice tight. "What are you? Is Dad home?" She didn't move. "Why?" "I want to talk." A moment passed. Then she stepped aside. "He's in the study." I found him at his desk, reading something on his tablet. He didn't look up when I walked in. "Look who finally decided to come home," he muttered, still scrolling. "I'm not here for a reunion," I said. "I'm here to tell you that I know. About the lies. The stories you've been spreading. About the emails. The fake narratives. Everything." He froze. Slowly, he set the tablet down and looked up at me. "I don't know what you think you know." I tossed the envelope onto his desk. He didn't open it. "You spent years trying to erase me," I said, keeping my voice calm. "But I didn't disappear. I built something. Something real. And you couldn't handle that, could you? Because it meant admitting you were wrong." He said nothing. "You told everyone I was a failure. That I was barely surviving. That I'd embarrassed the family. But the only embarrassment in this house is the man who thought lying about his own son made him more respectable." His mouth opened, but I cut him off. "I'm not here to argue. I'm not here to scream. I'm here to let you know that whatever twisted version of me you've created, that ends today. The real story is out. And you can either accept that, or spend the rest of your life pretending you didn't raise a man more successful than you'll ever be." He flinched at that. "Good. I'm done trying to earn your respect. You lost the right to give it." With that, I turned and walked out. Mom tried to stop me in the hall, stammering something about how things got misunderstood. I didn't even look at her. I left the house for the last time. That was 8 months ago. Since then, things have shifted, not because I forced them to, but because I stopped playing along with their script. Tessa reached out a few times. Apologies, long messages, guilt-ridden paragraphs about how she never realized how deep the favoritism ran. I responded politely, but I didn't go out of my way to repair anything. Maybe one day. Maybe not. James and I stayed in occasional contact. I respect that he told me the truth. I don't trust him, not fully, but I respect him. As for my parents, I haven't heard a word. No calls. No emails. Nothing. But a few weeks ago, I got an alert that someone had requested a meeting with my company's legal team. An anonymous inquiry about licensing fees and brand use, traced back to a small consulting firm run by, you guessed it, Uncle Greg. I declined the request. That same day, I donated a large sum to a nonprofit that funds hospitality scholarships for low-income students. The donation was made in my father's name. A week later, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Just 2 words inside. Why? I smiled. Because some legacies you inherit, others you build, and mine. Mine is better than anything they could have imagined. I knew something was off when I got to the restaurant and the waiter asked if I'd still be needing a table for 5. I smiled and said yes, knowing full well I shouldn't have. I was raised to believe that family showed up, especially for the big moments. But there I was, in a corner booth near the window, fiddling with the napkin and checking my phone every 10 seconds like some rookie on a first date. I even laughed to myself, trying to play it cool. "They're just late," I muttered under my breath, as I ordered a drink I didn't really want. "My name's Eric, I'm 33, and after nearly a decade of busting my back in the same mid-sized firm, I finally got the promotion I've been chasing for years. Senior Project Director. It wasn't just a title, it was validation. It was all the nights I worked past midnight while my friends were out. It was every weekend I said no to a beer so I could finish another report. It was stability. It was progress. It was mine. And I wanted to share it with the people who said they believed in me. My mom, my brother Jordan, my cousin Michelle, and Uncle Ray. That was the short list. The ones who said they were so proud of me last Christmas. The ones who cried when I bought Mom a car she could rely on and covered the mortgage when Dad passed. The same people who told me, "You're the glue holding us together." 2 hours passed. No calls. No texts. The only thing lighting up my phone was a notification from my banking app showing the restaurant tab climbing steadily. I told the waiter to bring out the entrees. I was too embarrassed to leave, now too stubborn to admit they'd bailed. It was when I took the first bite of my steak, trying to pretend I wasn't sitting in an empty booth, that my phone buzzed again. Family night out for the real success story. Attached was a group photo. Smiling faces. Wine glasses. My mom. My brother. Michelle. Uncle Ray. All dressed up at some beachside grill. Jordan was standing front and center holding a key fob in one hand and flashing a cheesy grin with the other. Behind him, a shiny new jet ski on a trailer. The caption? He earned this. So proud of you, bro. I stared at that photo for what felt like 10 minutes. No mention of me. Not even a sorry, we'll make it up to you. Just a big fat family gathering for Jordan and his impulsive toy. And then I saw the message from Mom, sent exactly an hour before that post. You're not exactly a priority right now. We'll catch up soon. Enjoy your dinner. I don't know what hit me harder, how casually it was written or how rehearsed it sounded, as if she'd been waiting for the right moment to finally say it. I paid the $1,940 bill, left a 25% tip, because the staff kept pretending not to notice how alone I was, and drove home in silence. When I got inside, I didn't turn the lights on. I just sat at the edge of my bed, phone in hand, going through memory after memory like a silent slideshow. Every grocery bill I covered. Every, I'll pay you back next week, that never happened. Every emergency call that ended with me wiring money, just until things stabilize. Every time Mom told me Jordan was just figuring himself out. Every lie I told myself that I wasn't being used. I walked into my home office, logged into the shared mortgage account I'd been silently funding for 3 years, and stared at the payment schedule. $1,830 monthly. Auto-deducted from my salary every 10th. I opened a new tab, clicked on the bank's contact, canceled it. Just like that. Then I grabbed a sticky note, scribbled 5 words, drove to the house I hadn't stepped foot in since Easter, and taped the note to the door. Let him pay it now. I didn't even wait to see if they were home. I drove off, phone on silent. I went to bed without brushing my teeth or changing clothes. The last thing I remember was the sound of my heartbeat echoing in my ears. By morning, my phone had 81 missed calls. Most were from Mom, a few from Jordan, one from Uncle Ray, and 3 texts from Michelle that said, "Call me now, are you serious, and we need to talk." But I didn't answer any of them. I just scrolled slowly through the missed calls, staring at the timestamps like they were puzzle pieces trying to form an apology that hadn't yet arrived. That's when I saw the voicemail icon. I hesitated. Something about hearing their voices felt heavier than reading their texts. Like it would make everything too real. But curiosity won. I pressed play, and what I heard next made me grip the edge of the nightstand until my knuckles turned white. It was my mother's voice, but not the one I grew up with, the soft, sing-song tone she used when she tucked me in as a kid, or the proud voice she used when I made honor roll in high school. No, this one was cold, high-pitched, frantic. "Eric, what did you do? The mortgage bounced. I got a call from the bank this morning, and they said the payment didn't go through. I don't understand. Why would you do that without telling us? You knew we were counting on you. Your brother, he's finally doing well, and you're being spiteful." Then, like some dramatic sitcom, she dropped her voice into a teary whisper. "This is not how family behaves." I replayed that line. "This is not how family behaves." Again and again, the irony sinking in deeper every time. The next voicemail was Jordan. "Bro, this is messed up. Mom's freaking out. We were gonna handle it. We just needed a little time. You didn't have to pull the plug like that. Seriously, are you trying to make us lose the house? A little time. 3 years of payments. But apparently I should have given them more time." The third voicemail was Michelle. She didn't even try to pretend. "Okay, wow. So you're punishing the whole family now? Over what? A dinner? Grow up. You always act like you're the martyr, like you're the only one who does anything for anyone. Newsflash, you're not the only one who works hard, Eric. Jordan's been hustling too. He finally got a break, and we wanted to celebrate. I'm sorry your little job promotion got overshadowed, but you didn't have to blow up everything over it." That one made me laugh. A tight, joyless laugh, but still. My little job promotion. I sat on the edge of my bed, looking around at the silence in my apartment. No family portraits. No souvenirs from group trips. Just a clean place I paid for, alone. It wasn't loneliness I felt, though. It was clarity. I finally saw the pattern I'd been ignoring for years. My brother, Jordan, always got the attention. The "he's just figuring things out" excuse was the family motto when it came to him. Even when he flunked out of 2 colleges. Even when he totaled his first car. Even when he started 3 businesses and let each one quietly fold without paying back a single loan. He was the dreamer, the one with potential. Meanwhile, I was the dependable one, the invisible safety net. They didn't clap for me when I got my degree early. They didn't throw a party when I paid off mom's car or when I negotiated with the bank to stop foreclosure after dad passed. But they called me a good son in public. They loved that image of me always being the stable one, the provider, the reliable background character in their louder, Messier story. Until I stopped. That afternoon, I finally answered one call. Uncle Ray. He was always the more level-headed one. Never got involved unless things went nuclear. I figured if anyone deserved a conversation, it was him. Eric, he said, voice low and tense. You've got to talk to your mother. Why? I asked, calm but blunt. So she can guilt me into covering for them again? He sighed. She's a wreck. Says she didn't know how left out you felt. I chuckled. She didn't know? Did she also not know she texted me to say I wasn't a priority? Ray didn't respond to that. Just silence. I let it hang there. They've got 30 days, I said finally. That's how long until the bank posts a final notice. She's scared they'll lose the house, he muttered. I shrugged, even though he couldn't see it. Maybe Jordan can sell the jet ski. Ray actually laughed. Just once, sharp and unexpected. Then he cleared his throat. You're serious, aren't you? For the first time in a long time. He didn't fight me on it. I think, in some twisted way, he understood. Maybe he'd seen this imbalance too, but didn't say anything. Maybe he'd been me once, just further down the road. Later that night, I got a long message from Mom. She called it a misunderstanding. She said she didn't mean for the dinner to turn into a competition. She tried to soften the language, even included an "I'm proud of you" buried somewhere in paragraph 5. But then she ended with, "Don't let this one mistake ruin everything we've built as a family." One mistake. It was then I realized we'd been building 2 very different things. I'd been building trust, responsibility, structure. They'd been building convenience. A system that worked as long as I didn't question it. The moment I pulled back, it cracked. The next morning, I checked the shared account. No payments had been made. No one had even tried. They were waiting for me to cave. To be the bigger person. That was always the script. I closed the account entirely. By that afternoon, Michelle showed up at my apartment. Uninvited. She knocked, hard, and when I opened the door, she marched right past me like she owned the place. We need to talk, she said, arms crossed. I stayed by the door. About what? About this little tantrum you're throwing. You're hurting Mom. I stared at her. Hurting her? She texted me mid-dinner to tell me I wasn't a priority. While celebrating Jordan, the guy who hasn't paid for a meal in years. He bought a jet ski, she shouted. He's doing something for himself. That's not a crime. No, I said slowly. But pretending like that's some grand achievement while dismissing everything I've done for the family? That's the problem. She glared at me, eyes sharp. You always act like you're the victim. No, I'm done being the sucker. She scoffed. They're your family. They were, I said quietly. Now they're just people I used to pay for. That was when the shouting outside began. Jordan, in the parking lot, pacing next to Mom's car. I watched him through the window, rubbing his hands through his hair, yelling into his phone. I didn't need to hear the words. I could guess every one. And I didn't move. Because for once, I wasn't going to be the one who cleaned it all up. Michelle didn't leave right away. She stood there, staring at me like she was trying to find the old version of me. The one who would have apologized by now. Maybe even offered to transfer a partial payment, just to ease the tension. I waited, arms crossed, saying nothing. She must have realized I wasn't bluffing, because eventually she turned without a word and walked out. No slam of the door, no dramatic final remark, just silence. It was a strange kind of calm after she left. Not peace exactly. More like stillness after a long storm, where you're not sure if the skies have cleared or if another wave is coming. I made coffee. I sat on my balcony. I watched the same neighbors walk their same dogs in their same routines. But my world had shifted. That afternoon, I got a text from my old friend Cam. He'd been my roommate back in college, knew my family dynamic better than most, though he'd only ever seen the tip of the iceberg. Dude, you okay? Your mom just called my mom. Said you're having a breakdown. I stared at it for a moment, then sent a short reply. Nah, just finally woke up. He didn't push further. Just sent back a thumbs up emoji and a proud of you, man. That hit harder than I expected. Around 6 p.m., my phone buzzed again. This time a FaceTime request from Mom. I didn't answer. A few minutes later, a long wall of text came through. She started soft, tried the warm, guilt-tinged maternal tone. Eric, sweetheart, please don't let this spiral any further. I know things didn't go the way you hoped, but we were genuinely happy for Jordan. We didn't mean to overshadow you. Can we talk? Please? I'll cook your favorite, lasagna night, just us. We need to fix this. Then, almost like flipping a switch, the second paragraph turned sharp. But canceling the mortgage was reckless. You put us all in jeopardy. You had no right to make a unilateral decision about the house, especially when you've been covering it voluntarily. This wasn't your burden to drop. Voluntarily. That word did something to me. As if I'd just happened to drop $65,000 over 3 years like it was spare change I stumbled over on my way to work. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just expectation. It reminded me of last Christmas, when Jordan had gifted Mom a designer bag, but used my credit card without asking. It's just easier this way, he'd said, laughing like it was a harmless prank. And Mom, she'd said I was overreacting for demanding he return it. It's family, she had whispered, patting my shoulder. You always help. It's just who you are. But maybe it didn't have to be. Later that evening, I was scrolling through emails when a new one popped up. Subject line: Notice of payment failure. Final warning. I opened it. It was the official 15-day notice before the mortgage entered default status. I could almost hear the panic setting in across town. I didn't reply. Instead, I pulled up the old spreadsheet I'd kept, one I hadn't updated in months. Every wire transfer, every utility payment, every temporary loan that was never repaid. Each row was neatly labeled, color-coded by recipient. It took up 10 full pages. Over $82,000 across the past 5 years. I stared at the total. Then I opened a blank document. Titled it, What I Owe Myself. And I began writing. It wasn't just a financial reckoning. It was personal, emotional. For every time I was talked over at the dinner table. For every, we'll get you next time birthday. For every celebration I funded and was excluded from. I didn't realize how heavy the weight had become until I finally set it down. That night, I received a video message from Jordan. He was sitting on the couch, hair a mess, face flushed. Man, what are you doing? He said, voice trembling with fake calm. You're punishing everyone over some dinner? Grow up. Yeah, we messed up. But this? You've got Mom crying every hour. Michelle's blowing up my phone. And now the bank's calling. He looked away for a second, then added, just turn the payments back on. We'll talk after. I didn't respond. Because they didn't want to talk. They wanted to reset the system. Patch the hole without addressing the leak. 3 days passed. I went to work like normal. I started jogging again. I cooked actual meals. It was almost comical how much time I suddenly had. I didn't have to check if Jordan's car insurance had renewed or if Mom's electric bill was paid. I didn't have to set calendar reminders for Michelle's rent. And every morning, I watched the group chat grow more chaotic. Michelle had renamed it to Emergency. Eric, please respond. Then Mortgage Crisis. Then Family Unity Chat. Broken heart emoji. I muted it. I only opened it once, just to read a message from Uncle Ray. I warned them this would happen. You were never the weak one. You were just too generous. That message? I saved it. Because it was the first time someone in that family said it out loud. The turning point came on the 7th day. Mom showed up at my door. But not alone. She brought Jordan. And Jordan brought the jet ski. On a trailer. Parked right in front of my apartment like a peace offering wrapped in idiocy. She knocked once, then again. I didn't answer. She called out, Eric, sweetheart. Please, just let us explain. I watched from the peephole. Jordan was pacing, holding a paper in his hand. From what I could see, it looked like a bank notice. Mom stepped back, looked directly at the door. I know you're in there, she said softly. You're proving your point, okay? We get it. You're upset. But don't throw away your family over one mistake. Another one. One mistake. That was when I realized she wasn't really here for me. She was here to fix the mortgage. Not the relationship. Not the betrayal. Not the years of emotional negligence. Just the payment. I didn't open the door that night. I just stood there, watching them through the peephole until Mom gave up and Jordan finally peeled away in that shiny black truck towing his dumb $9,000 apology. I remember wondering if he'd even made the last insurance payment on it. The next day was payday. For the first time in years, my account didn't show a giant deduction to cover a house I didn't live in. My paycheck felt heavier, like it meant something now, like it was mine. I stared at the total for a long time, trying to remember the last time I had looked at my own bank balance and smiled. But the peace didn't last long. By noon, I got a call from the bank's collections department. The house, my mother's house, was officially 2 payments behind, and because of the type of mortgage, the default process had already started. I wasn't liable, of course. I'd removed my name years ago after covering enough temporary payments to realize I was being roped into more than I ever agreed to. But that didn't stop the bank from trying. "I'm not the responsible party," I told the woman calmly. "You'll want to contact the homeowner directly." There was a pause. Then the woman said something that stuck with me. She said, "You'd handle it." Said, "You've always handled it." That's when I realized Mom hadn't told them I stopped paying. She hadn't called the bank herself. She just waited, expected, assumed that the safety net she'd wrapped herself and wouldn't dare walk away. Until it did. That evening, I got the knock again. This time, Mom was alone. No Jordan. No trailer. Just her and a tote bag. "Eric," she said when I opened the door, "please. We need to talk." I didn't say anything. I just stepped aside and let her in. She walked like she was entering a stranger's house. Looking around, eyes wide, like she was expecting to find photos of herself still on my walls. There weren't any. I motioned for her to sit. She didn't. She stood by the window and looked out, then turned to face me. "We're going to lose the house." I nodded. I figured. "You can stop this," she said, voice cracking. "You can call the bank and—" "No," I interrupted. Calm. Final. She blinked. "What?" I said no. "I'm not calling the bank. I'm not making any payments. I'm done." Her jaw tightened. "This isn't just about money, Eric. It's about family." I almost laughed. "Mom, the night of my promotion dinner, you texted me to say I wasn't a priority. Then you threw a party for Jordan because he bought a jet ski. You called that family. I call it a joke." She flinched. "It wasn't meant to hurt you. But it did. And you didn't care until the bills stopped getting paid." Silence stretched between us. She lowered herself slowly into the chair like she was settling into the weight of it all. "I didn't realize how much you were covering," she said softly. "That's the problem," I replied. "You never wanted to realize it." She shook her head, voice barely above a whisper. "Jordan's not like you. He needs more help." "No, Mom," I said firmly. "He needs consequences." She looked up at me, eyes glassy. "He's your brother. And I'm your son." She stared at me. And for once, there was no defense. No script. No guilt trip. Just the empty echo of truth sitting heavy between us. "I didn't want to believe it," she said. "That you'd just leave us like this." "I didn't leave," I corrected. "I stopped being used." She swallowed hard. "What are we supposed to do?" "You figure it out." Like I had to. Like adults do. She blinked, then looked away. And for a moment, I saw her not as the mom who raised me, but as a person flawed, scared, and entirely unequipped to deal with the reality she'd built. When she stood to leave, she didn't hug me. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She just gathered her bag and paused at the door. "Is this really the end?" she asked. I thought about it. About birthdays I spent alone. About covering holidays, tuition, medical bills. About every time I was asked to make room for someone else, while no one made space for me. "It's the end of me pretending this was love," I said quietly. She nodded. Didn't argue. Just opened the door and stepped out. And that should have been the end. But it wasn't. Because 10 days later, Jordan showed up. Not at my door. At my work. I was mid-meeting when my phone buzzed with a text from the receptionist. "There's a man in the lobby asking for you. Says it's urgent." Jordan. My stomach dropped. I excused myself and headed down. There he was, sitting in a chair, tapping his foot, wearing sunglasses indoors like some kind of failed celebrity. When he saw me, he stood. "Hey, we need to talk." I didn't move. "Here." "Yeah, well, you've been dodging everyone. Figured I'd come to you." I led him outside. We stood under a tree near the parking lot. He wasted no time. "We lost the house," he said. I stayed quiet. "They gave Mom 30 days to vacate. Michelle's trying to help but can't do much. Uncle Ray's ticked. Says we should have seen it coming." I nodded once. "Why'd you do it, man?" he asked. You got your little promotion. You were fine. You mean financially? I asked. He shrugged. Yeah, you're the one with the stable job. And that meant I had to carry everyone else? He looked at me like I was speaking a different language. I bought the jet ski because for once, I wanted to do something for me, he muttered. And I stopped paying the mortgage because for once, so did I. He stared at me, and something shifted. His mouth twitched. A realization creeping in behind the ego. Mom's gonna stay with Michelle, he said eventually. I'll probably crash at Uncle Ray's. Good. He looked down at the gravel. I guess I always figured you'd just keep handling it. I know, I said. He looked back up, eyes narrowing. So that's it? You're just out? Not out, I said. Free. He shook his head. You think you're better than us? No, I said. Just better without you. He didn't like that. But he didn't argue. Just turned, walked to his car, and drove off. That night, I opened my phone, scrolled through the group chat one last time, read every message I'd ignored. Then I deleted it. 1 week later, I moved to a new apartment, bought a desk I'd been eyeing for months, booked a solo vacation. I even got myself a new number. The money I used to spend on them, I put it into a high-yield savings account. The time I used to spend worrying, I spent reading, hiking, sleeping in. And the guilt? Gone. Because sometimes the cruelest thing you can do to someone who's used to leaning on you is stand up and walk away. For good. My name's Daniel. I'm 54 years old, and if you told me 10 years ago that the little girl who once begged me to braid her hair for school would one day pretend I didn't exist at her wedding, I might have laughed in disbelief. But that's the funny thing about family. The people you give the most to often think they're entitled to even more. And sometimes, they only see your value when the credit card declines. I met Grace when she was just 9. Her mother, Olivia, and I had both gone through difficult divorces, hers a bit messier than mine. Her ex-husband, Jeremy, wasn't around much. He'd pop in twice a year, drop off a check, maybe take Grace for an ice cream, then vanish again for 6 months. Meanwhile, Olivia and I were building something stable, day by day. I wasn't trying to replace anyone, but I was always there for the school plays, the scraped knees, the late-night math homework, the first heartbreak. I showed up, even when it was inconvenient. Especially when it was inconvenient. Over time, she started calling me Dad. It wasn't something I ever asked for. In fact, I told her early on that I'd never try to take that role unless she wanted me to. The day she looked up at me after her middle school graduation and said, "Thanks, Dad," I'll admit, I teared up. Olivia squeezed my hand like she knew exactly what that meant to me. I paid for her braces, helped her get her first car, nothing flashy, just a safe-used Honda I'd saved up for. When she got into her dream college, I drove the U-Haul myself and stayed up 2 nights putting together IKEA furniture in her dorm. Every Christmas, birthday, and random Tuesday she forgot her umbrella, I was there. Not because I had to be, but because I loved her. But something shifted when she turned 20. It was subtle at first. The thank yous became more scarce. Her phone calls turned transactional. Then came her senior year, when Jeremy reappeared in a big way. He'd apparently turned over a new leaf. He started posting old photos of them together on Facebook, writing captions like, "So proud of my little girl," conveniently cropping Olivia and me out of frame. Grace lapped it up like she was starving for his approval. I didn't blame her. Every kid wants to be wanted by their parent, even if that parent only shows up when it's convenient. Still, I couldn't help but feel pushed aside, like I'd been the substitute teacher all along. Then came the engagement. She was thrilled. I was genuinely happy for her, at first. I remember sitting on the couch while she waved her hand in front of us, the diamond catching the light. Olivia clapped, and I pulled her into a hug. "We're so proud of you," I said. Grace smiled. But that smile didn't quite reach her eyes when she replied, "Thanks. I'm just glad I'll have both my parents there to walk me down the aisle." I blinked. Olivia glanced at me and cleared her throat. "You mean," she began, but Grace cut her off. "Of course I mean Dad," she said, meaning Jeremy. Not the man who taught her how to ride a bike or stayed up with her when she had the flu. Not me. I brushed it off at the time. Told myself it was just a phase, maybe a sentimental moment. She was reconnecting with her roots, trying to build a bridge. I could respect that. I could even step aside for it. But the signs kept piling up. She started referring to Jeremy as Dad exclusively again, and to me as Daniel whenever we were around other people. She removed my last name from her social media bios, which had once read Grace Thompson, and reverted to her birth surname. She didn't ask me to give a speech. When I gently offered to help cover wedding costs, she smiled, nodded, and then asked if I could front the $12,000 for the venue deposit. No mention of reimbursement. No, thank you. Just the assumption I'd handle it. I did. Not for her, but because I knew Olivia couldn't bear to see her daughter's big day fall apart. I told myself I wouldn't take it personally, that I was doing this for the family, for love. But as the months passed, I felt more like an ATM with legs than a father figure. Olivia noticed, too. She tried to talk to Grace about it, gently, carefully, but Grace would shut her down, accusing her of trying to guilt-trip me for wanting my real dad in my life. That word, real, stung more than I let on. The week before the wedding, I overheard a conversation I wasn't meant to hear. I had come home early from work and paused in the hallway when I heard Olivia and Grace talking in the kitchen. "He's paid for almost everything," Grace, Olivia said, her voice low but firm. "You can't just pretend he doesn't exist. He's been more of a father to you than Jeremy ever was." Grace scoffed. "That's his choice. No one forced him to. You used to call him Dad," Olivia pressed. "That was before I had a real one again," she snapped. I walked back out the door before they knew I was there. I didn't say a word. I just drove until the gas light came on. The wedding day arrived, and I put on my best suit. Tied my tie 3 times before I got the knot right. I showed up early, helped set up chairs, coordinated with the caterers, and made sure the sound system worked. Grace barely acknowledged me when I passed her. Jeremy showed up late, wearing cologne so strong it could have cleared a room. She squealed and hugged him like a soldier returning from war. I stood back, watching it all, feeling like an extra in a movie I'd funded but wasn't allowed to star in. During the ceremony, I sat quietly next to Olivia. When the officiant asked who was walking her down the aisle, Grace looped her arm through Jeremy's and beamed. No mention of me. Not a glance. The reception was worse. The father-daughter dance was with Jeremy. The speech she gave thanked her mother, her wonderful new in-laws, and my incredible dad, Jeremy, who came back into my life at just the right moment. She never said my name. Not once. I didn't make a scene. I didn't leave. I smiled when people looked my way. I shook hands, toasted the couple, clapped during the dances. But inside, something was unraveling. A quiet, slow burn. After the cake was cut and most of the guests had filtered out, I was standing by the back table collecting my jacket when Grace approached me. She looked radiant and smug, the kind of tired that comes after a long day of being celebrated. She handed me a folded piece of paper. "The final balance," she said cheerfully, as if we were just settling a tab after lunch. "Thought you'd want to take care of it before we fly out tomorrow." I unfolded the paper. The number made my jaw tighten. I looked at her. She smiled, expecting me to nod, to reach for my wallet like always. I didn't. And that's when I turned and walked right past her, down the stairs, through the parking lot, and into the night, without saying a single word. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was angry. That would have been easier. I didn't even feel hurt, exactly. What I felt was something colder. Like a door had quietly shut somewhere deep inside me, and I didn't have the energy, or the desire, to ever open it again. I stared at the ceiling for hours, watching the shadows shift with the headlights passing outside my bedroom window. Olivia came home late, clearly frazzled, clearly aware something had shifted. She tried to talk to me, but I told her gently, "Not tonight." I wasn't ready to say out loud what I knew was coming. The next morning, my phone buzzed nonstop. Missed calls, messages from Olivia, from Grace, even from Jeremy, which surprised me, since he had barely acknowledged me the whole weekend. I ignored them all. Instead, I made coffee, sat in my home office, and pulled out a thick binder labeled Wedding Expenses. Every receipt, every wire transfer, every invoice, all neatly categorized. It added up to just under $38,000. I had footed over 80% of the entire event, including the extravagant last-minute upgrades Grace just had to have. Imported centerpieces, a late-night taco bar, and that ridiculous champagne tower. And the kicker? That final balance she handed me? It wasn't an official bill. It was just a scribbled total she'd jotted down herself, including line items that had already been paid by me. In essence, she'd double-billed me. And she thought I'd be too spineless or too sentimental to call her on it. I spent that Sunday filing a dispute with the venue and every vendor I'd paid directly. I sent in the receipts, emails, and proof of payment. I froze the remaining portion of the wedding fund I had in a joint account with Olivia, something I'd set up so she could make emergency purchases leading up to the wedding. I also sent Grace a simple message. I will no longer be responsible for any part of your wedding costs moving forward. Any outstanding balance is between you and your biological father. Please direct future communication through your mother. Wishing you all the best in your new life. I didn't even sign it. Just hit send and turned off my phone. That night, Olivia and I had the conversation. A real one. No more tiptoeing. She was heartbroken. Not just about Grace, but about us. About how it had all played out. She admitted she'd noticed the shift in Grace's behavior, but she was hoping it was just nerves or stress. I thought she'd come around, she said. I thought once she saw everything you did for her. She did see, I said quietly. She just didn't care. Olivia didn't argue. The next few days were a whirlwind. Grace sent a lengthy, self-pitying email, not to apologize, but to justify. She said she didn't mean to hurt my feelings, but it was her day, and she shouldn't have to pretend for anyone else's comfort. She also added that she thought I was being childish for walking out and abandoning my responsibilities, which was rich, considering I'd been the only reason her wedding had even happened. I didn't respond. A week later, Jeremy called. That's right. The man who hadn't paid a dime toward the wedding, who had shown up late, danced, posed for photos, and left, now had the audacity to leave a voicemail saying, "Man to man, I think you overreacted. You know girls and their dads, it's emotional. She needed me, and I stepped up. Don't punish her for choosing her real family." I sat there staring at my phone like it had grown fangs. He stepped up? Stepped up? I'd stepped up when Grace was in the hospital at 13 with appendicitis and Jeremy was too busy. I'd stepped up when her financial aid fell through sophomore year, and she was too embarrassed to tell anyone. I'd stepped up every day for a decade without ever asking for credit. But sure, Jeremy bought her a watch and stood beside her in a tux, and suddenly, he was Father of the Year. That's when I decided I wasn't just going to walk away. I was going to make it clear I was done being used. I called the accountant who handled my personal finances and told him to begin dissolving the joint account. I updated my will. Grace was no longer listed as a beneficiary. I made a sizable donation to a scholarship fund for foster youth, kids who, unlike Grace, actually needed support. Then I wrote a final letter to Olivia. Not spiteful, not angry, just final. In it, I explained that I didn't blame her for what happened, not entirely. But I couldn't keep pouring myself into a family that only saw my worth in numbers and transactions. I told her I still cared for her, and always would, but I needed to protect what little self-respect I had left. I left the letter on the kitchen counter and moved into a condo across town that I'd quietly purchased months earlier as a backup plan. I'd never thought I'd actually use it, but something in me had known. Maybe I was just waiting for a reason. Weeks passed, then a month. Olivia tried to reach out a few times. Grace didn't. I heard through a mutual friend that she and Jeremy had tried to take out a personal loan to cover the rest of the wedding costs, but were denied. Apparently, they were stunned that the wealthy stepdad had suddenly turned into a ghost. Then one afternoon, while I was at work, I got a message from Olivia. She's here. She wants to talk. Please, she's crying. I didn't reply right away. I sat at my desk, staring at the message, remembering every smile I'd given that girl. Every small moment of fatherhood I thought had meant something. Every dollar, every sleepless night, every proud look at graduation, every whispered, "Don't worry, I've got you." Then I stood up, packed my briefcase, and drove home. When I walked in, Grace was sitting on the living room couch, hands clasped, eyes red. She stood when she saw me. "Daniel," she began. But I raised a hand, and what I said next, and what she did in response, changed everything. She opened her mouth again, but I stayed quiet, calm, controlled. I walked past her, set my briefcase down on the table like I'd just come home from an ordinary day at work, then turned and met her eyes. Really met them, not with anger, but with something firmer, something final. "You know," I said, "when you were 13, you begged me to come to your school's father-daughter breakfast because you didn't want to sit alone. You said Jeremy hadn't even texted in 6 months. I took the morning off, wore that awful blue tie you liked, and brought your favorite muffins. You held my arm and told everyone I was your dad." Grace blinked, lips pressed into a tight line. Her cheeks flushed, from embarrassment or shame, I couldn't tell. "You remember that?" she asked quietly. "I remember everything, Grace. Because I was there for everything. And I wasn't keeping score, not then. But apparently, someone was." She looked down at her hands, twisting her fingers. I messed up, she said. I know I did. I was trying to, I don't know, make peace with things. Jeremy wanted to be more involved. I didn't think it would hurt you like that. I tilted my head. Didn't think? Or didn't care? She flinched. That's not fair. What's not fair? I cut in, my voice low but unwavering. Is that you made me pay for a seat at a table I was never really invited to. You walked past me, again and again, and each time I told myself to let it go. I sat there through every slight, every omission, every erasure of 10 years of my life. And still, I paid for the napkins. That last sentence caught her off guard. She looked up, confused. Napkins. Custom monogram napkins, I said, almost laughing at the absurdity. $4.72 for linen with your new last name. The one I'm not part of. Silence. I didn't mean for it to be like this, she murmured. I got caught up in the idea of finally having my real dad around. I thought. You thought I'd just take it, I interrupted, but softer now. Like always. Olivia stepped out of the hallway then, eyes red. She must have been listening. She didn't say anything, but Grace turned to her like a lifeline. Mom, tell him. But Olivia just shook her head slowly. No, Grace. Not this time. Grace looked between us, realizing perhaps for the first time that she wasn't going to be rescued by sentiment or guilt. The ground beneath her was shifting, and she didn't know how to steady herself. I didn't expect you to just disappear, she said, voice cracking. I didn't disappear, I replied. I just stopped showing up for people who treat me like a utility. You made a choice at your wedding. I'm making one now. Tears welled in her eyes, but I felt nothing rise in response. Not pity, not satisfaction, just stillness. I came to apologize, she said. To fix things. No, I said. You came to stop the fallout. That's not the same. She sat down, suddenly deflated. So that's it. You're just done. I looked at her for a long moment. I don't know, I admitted. But what I do know is that forgiveness can't be demanded after a silence like that. It has to be earned. And that's not something I can hand out like another check. Her shoulders dropped, and for the first time, she didn't argue, didn't protest or try to explain. She just sat there, surrounded by the wreckage of a relationship she hadn't even realized she'd demolished until it was too late. I gathered my things, nodded once to Olivia, and headed for the door. Just as I reached it, Grace called out behind me, voice trembling. What do I have to do to fix this? I paused, hand on the doorknob, not looking back. You start by not asking me to tell you, I said. Then I walked out. I didn't go far, just around the block, to breathe, to clear my head. I wasn't sure if I was done forever, but I was sure I was done being taken for granted. And what happened in the days that followed? Well, that's when things got real. The next morning, my phone stayed silent. No messages, no missed calls, no apologies. Just an empty inbox and a strange kind of quiet I hadn't felt in years. And despite everything, I still checked, not because I hoped she'd grovel, but because I needed to know if she'd really let this go without a fight. She did. For 3 days, there was nothing. Olivia texted once, a simple, I'm so sorry. I didn't answer. I wasn't angry at her, not really, but I needed space. For years I'd been the foundation everyone built their lives on, and now that I'd stepped away, the cracks were showing. I was done being the steady background character. I wanted to see if anyone remembered who'd been holding the camera the whole time. On the 4th day, I got a knock at my office door. Not the condo, my actual office, where I ran my consultancy business. My assistant buzzed in, sounding a little uneasy. There's a young woman here. Says her name's Grace. She doesn't have an appointment. I paused. My first instinct was to tell her to send Grace away. But something about the way my assistant said her name made me curious. Tired, maybe. Or nervous. Send her in, I said. Grace walked in, not with the arrogance she used to carry like perfume, but slowly, like someone walking into a church or a hospital room. Her hair was tied back, her makeup minimal. No designer purse. No smug smile. Just her and a thin folder tucked under her arm. She sat across from me and opened the folder without saying a word. Inside was a collection of receipts, bank statements, payment breakdowns, a typed letter, neatly formatted, with a heading that read, Wedding Expense Reconciliation Report. She slid it across the table to me. I went through everything, she said quietly. Every vendor, every transfer, every line item. I called the venue, the caterer, even the florist. I made a list of what you paid and what I owe you. I added interest, and I broke it into a repayment plan over 3 years. If you agree to the terms, I'll sign it. I blinked. She wasn't crying. She wasn't begging. She was just sitting there, doing the one thing I hadn't expected, taking accountability. I got your message, she said, and I hated it. At first, I thought you were being dramatic, even petty. But then I started thinking about it, not from my point of view, but yours. I remembered the time you drove 6 hours back from a business trip because I forgot my college essay was due and I needed help proofreading. You sat with me until 2 in the morning, then left at 5 to make it to a meeting in another state. You didn't even bring it up again. You just did it. She looked down at her hands. And I thought about the birthday party I had when I was 16, the one where Jeremy said he'd come but never showed. You drove around town trying to find the last copy of that out-of-print book series I loved and gave it to me like it was no big deal. And I hugged you. I really hugged you, because in that moment, I didn't miss him at all. Her voice shook, but she steadied it. I remembered all of it. And the more I remembered, the worse I felt. Because I realized I didn't just erase you from the wedding, I erased you from my story. Like you were a placeholder until the real dad showed up. She finally met my eyes. But you were never a placeholder. You were the only one who stayed. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My throat had tightened, and I wasn't sure I trusted my voice just yet. I'm not asking you to forgive me today, she said. But I wanted you to know that I see it now. All of it. And I'm going to make it right. Not with words, with time. With action. I opened the folder. The numbers were accurate. The plan was fair. She'd even included a clause that said if she missed more than 2 payments in a row, the debt would become due in full. It wasn't about the money. Never had been. But she knew that. And that's why this mattered. After a long moment, I nodded. All right, I said. Let's see how serious you are. She exhaled, not with relief, but something deeper. Resolve, maybe. That was 6 months ago. Since then, she's made every payment on time. Small at first, $150 here, $200 there, but consistent. More than that, she's shown up. She calls once a week. She invited me to dinner with her and her husband, just the 3 of us. No grand speeches, no forced apologies, just a chance to talk, to laugh, to start over. Olivia and I had our own journey, too. We didn't get back together, not right away. We took some space. And in that space, we talked more honestly than we had in years. We're seeing each other again now, carefully. Slowly. Like 2 people learning how to trust with their eyes open. Grace asked me last week if I consider being a part of her child's life. She's pregnant. Due in a few months. Her voice shook when she asked, like she expected me to say no. I didn't. I told her I'd think about it. And then I smiled. I've got a lot of good bedtime stories stocked up. She cried. Happy tears, this time. We're not perfect. There are still scars. But scars mean healing, not forgetting. And now, for the first time in a long time, I don't feel invisible. I feel seen. Not for what I gave, but for who I was. Who I am. And sometimes, that's the most powerful revenge of all. Not the silent exit, not the cold goodbye, but becoming someone they can no longer ignore. Because in the end, I didn't walk out to make them feel guilty. I walked out to remind myself that I still mattered. And now? Now they know it too. I'm Aaron, 33, and Christmas used to be my favorite time of the year. It wasn't about the gifts or the food. It was the one time everyone in my family acted like they still liked each other. We'd gather at my parents' house, exchange cheap presents wrapped in shiny paper, eat way too much ham, and play the same off-key Christmas songs on loop until someone, usually my cousin Jared, knocked over a glass of wine or tripped over the dog. It was chaotic, loud, occasionally passive-aggressive, but it was home. Or at least, it used to be. This year, I started prepping early. I got a few thoughtful gifts shipped out, nothing crazy, just things I knew they'd like. A new immersion blender for Mom because hers had started smoking during Thanksgiving. A pair of limited edition sneakers for my sister Emily, who never shuts up about her fashion TikTok. And I even mailed a crate of specialty beers for Dad, which I knew would be gone by Boxing Day. I didn't mind spending the money. I've been fortunate. My job pays well. And even though I live in a studio apartment across the state, I always made sure to help out when things got tight back home. Rent, utility bills, car insurance. I'd sent more than a few quiet transfers when my dad would text something vague like, "Can you spot me till next Friday?" Always no fuss, no drama. Just family. So I was shocked when, on December 20th, I got a message in our family group chat. My mom wrote, "Hey kids, after a lot of thought, we're canceling Christmas this year." Just too expensive to host everyone. And with everything going on, we're thinking of keeping it low-key. Love you all. That was it. No calls. No offers to meet halfway. No, we'll make it up to you. Just a cold, impersonal message. I blinked at my phone, half expecting it to be a prank or a misunderstanding, but when I replied, asking if they were sure, Emily just sent a thumbs-up emoji and changed the group chat photo to a stock image of a sad snowman. I didn't argue. I just said, okay, understood, and that was that. I didn't push for a call, didn't guilt-trip them. I figured, fine. Life gets tight, and maybe they just needed a quiet year. I bought myself some groceries, heated up a lasagna on Christmas Eve, and tried to make the best of it. I watched Home Alone for the 15th time, lit the pine-scented candle my coworker had given me, and scrolled through Reddit as the snow fell outside my window. Christmas Day came and went. I slept in, FaceTimed a couple of friends, and spent most of the day trying not to feel too bitter. I told myself, at least you didn't have to fake a smile while Aunt Sherry rants about politics. I tried to be mature, to not take it personally. But it gnawed at me anyway. Something didn't feel right. The silence was just off. It wasn't until around 8 p.m. that night when my phone buzzed with a notification from Instagram. Emily had gone live. Out of curiosity, or maybe some twisted hope that she was just drinking wine alone and bored, I clicked it, and my stomach dropped. She was at our parents' house. The same house I had offered to help decorate just 2 weeks earlier. The living room was lit up like a Macy's display, twinkling lights, a massive Christmas tree, tinsel strung across every wall. A DJ booth was set up near the fireplace, of all places, and people were dancing with plastic cups in hand. There were at least 30 people in that house, laughing, shouting, cheering as they toasted champagne. Merry Christmas from the real crew. Emily shouted into the camera, panning across the room. I spotted my cousins, my aunts and uncles, even Jared, who was already red-faced and slurring his words. Someone popped a confetti cannon, and the streamers flew across the room in a burst of gold. I stared at the screen, my thumb frozen over the leave button. So it wasn't about money. It wasn't about things being tight. It was about me. I don't know how long I sat there. Probably too long. Long enough for the lasagna to go cold. Long enough for the candle to burn halfway down. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat still, stunned, letting the quiet betrayal sink in. I'd been cut out. Silently, cleanly, and without any explanation. The next morning, December 26th, I got a text from Dad. No hello. No Merry Christmas. Not even a question about how I was doing. Just, can you send over the $3,100 for January? Need it by tomorrow if possible. That was it. No mention of the party. No apology. No attempt to lie or even pretend things were normal. Just a cold, dry request for money, as if I was a walking ATM with no memory. And something in me just snapped. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I opened my banking app and started scrolling. I pulled up every recurring payment I had tied to them. The rent I'd been covering on the second property my dad had temporarily moved into. The cell phone plan Emily was still on. The Spotify family account I'd been paying for. Even the utilities, gas, electric, internet. All of it was under my name. All of it was on my dime. I paused for a second. Not out of doubt, just to make sure I wasn't acting out of rage alone. But no, this wasn't impulsive. This was overdue. I replied, lose my number. I don't fund liars. Then I blocked his number. Then I shut down every single transfer, autopay, and linked account. I made the rounds with every service rep, every utility company, every bank associate, explaining the situation. One of them, Susan, from the gas company, even said, "That's awful. I hope you're okay." I told her, "I will be. Thanks." I didn't go nuclear. I didn't post a rant online or call to yell. I just cut the cord. Quiet. Clean. Just like they had done to me. By 7:43 a.m. the next day, my phone had 53 missed calls. I didn't answer any of them, but I did listen to one voicemail. It was my mother. Her voice was shaky. "Please, call us. There's been a misunderstanding. Just, please call." I didn't delete the message. I didn't respond either. Because for the first time in years, I finally felt like I had the upper hand. And I wasn't done yet. I didn't respond that morning. Not that day. Not even the next. Every few hours, my phone would buzz, blocked numbers, anonymous voicemails, even a few desperate DMs from extended family members I hadn't spoken to in years. One of my cousins wrote, "Hey man, you didn't miss much. It was just thrown together last minute. No big deal." I didn't even dignify it with a reply. I just screenshotted it and added it to a folder I'd started on my phone titled Evidence. Because I wasn't just walking away, I was making sure they never did this again. By the end of December, the fallout had officially begun. The phone plan was deactivated. Emily made a dramatic post about how some people just love ruining Christmas and hinted at a betrayal within the family. A few of her followers offered sympathy. Most didn't care. She tried messaging me directly a few times, but her messages bounced. She forgot she was blocked. Then came Dad. I got an email, his last resort. Subject: urgent. Please, Aaron, just talk to us. It was long, winding, full of phrases like, "You've always been sensitive," and "You're blowing things out of proportion." He didn't mention the lie, didn't mention the party, just said they were in a really tough place right now financially, and how they trusted me to be there for them, like always. He signed off with, "You're still our son. Family comes first." I almost laughed. So now family comes first? I closed the email without replying, but something about that last line stuck with me. Family comes first. I kept hearing it over and over, like a slogan they'd only remembered after things stopped going their way. And maybe it would have ended there, just the quiet satisfaction of cutting off the lifeline they assumed would always be there. But then my bank flagged an unusual login attempt. At first, I thought it was phishing, but after a quick call, they confirmed it. Someone had tried to access my online banking from a known device, an old iPad I'd left at the house during a visit 2 years ago. I hadn't thought anything of it back then, but I'd never logged out. I stared at the report on my screen. Someone had tried 3 times to change the password. I knew exactly who it was. The next morning, I drove out. I didn't call ahead. I didn't warn them. I just showed up. Their house looked exactly like it always had. Christmas lights still hanging, drooping and half dead by now, with a plastic Santa slumped sideways on the lawn. I parked across the street and just sat for a moment. The windows were dark. No laughter. No music. Just silence. I rang the bell once. No answer. Then I knocked. Eventually, the door opened. My dad stood there in a wrinkled hoodie, hair unkempt, eyes tired, like he hadn't slept in days. "Aaron," he said, like he couldn't believe I was real. "Where's the iPad?" I asked. He blinked. "What? The one I left here. Where is it?" He shifted. I mean, we haven't used it." "Maybe, Emily." "Save it," I said. "I know someone tried to access my bank. From that device. 3 times. He opened his mouth, then shut it. "I'm here to collect it. And then I'm done. For good." He didn't argue. Just turned and walked back inside. I stepped in after him. Just for a second, just long enough to see the aftermath. The house was a mess. Trash still in the kitchen from the party. Empty bottles on the counter. The vibe was different now. Dead, drained. Whatever joy they'd faked for Instagram had dried up the second the money disappeared. Emily came down the stairs as I was leaving. She looked like she'd been crying. She opened her mouth, probably to deliver some half-baked apology or excuse, but I didn't stop walking. I didn't care anymore. I grabbed the iPad off the living room table and walked out. "Wait, Aaron, can we talk?" she called after me. "Just 5 minutes. Please." I turned at the door. "I gave you 5 years," I said. "We're even." I left, got in the car, and didn't look back. Back at home, I reset every password, disabled every device, and called my lawyer friend. Not to sue them, just to get a few things in writing. I wanted everything airtight. No way for them to sneak back in. No loopholes. A few days later, I got another email. Subject: apology. This one was shorter. Just a few lines. "My mom this time. We made a mistake. We thought you'd always forgive us. We didn't realize how far we'd pushed you. I'm sorry. We all are. Please, if there's any chance we can talk, I'll listen this time. I promise." I didn't reply, not out of spite, but because sometimes silence is the only language people like that understand. I didn't need revenge in the traditional sense. I didn't need to humiliate them or scream in their faces. I just needed them to feel what it's like to lose something they never thought could walk away. And judging by the silence that followed, they did. January drifted by in a blur of cold mornings and quiet evenings. I kept my head down at work, avoided social media, and made a point to focus on myself. It was strange at first, this silence. No constant texts asking for a little help or passive-aggressive messages about how I never visit. No last-minute requests for transfers. No guilt. Just peace. But of course, it didn't last. The first crack came from Aunt Meredith. She called from a number I didn't recognize, and when I picked up out of curiosity, her voice came through tight and sharp, like she'd been holding back. "Aaron," she said, "I'm just calling to say, I'm disappointed." I didn't respond. I waited. "Whatever happened between you and your parents is one thing," she went on, "but you don't turn your back on family, especially not when they're struggling." I kept my tone even. "Meredith, did they tell you why I stopped helping?" She paused. "They said you had a meltdown over not being invited to a last-minute party, that you're blowing things out of proportion." I let out a slow breath. "Did they also tell you I've been paying their rent for nearly 3 years? That I've covered Emily's phone bill, Dad's gas, and Mom's grocery deliveries while they were posting selfies with champagne?" Another pause. Longer this time. "Well," she muttered, "even if that's true, it doesn't justify cutting them off completely." "I didn't cut them off," I said. "They chose to exclude me. I just accepted it." She sighed. "Aaron, you're better than this." "No," I said quietly. "I used to be. But better just made me useful. Now I'm done." I hung up before she could reply. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sad. I felt clean. But they weren't done. 2 days later, I came home from work and found a handwritten envelope wedged in my doorframe. It was from my mother. Inside was a letter for pages long. She had written it in cursive, her attempt at making it feel personal, I guess. It opened with a tearful apology. She admitted they shouldn't have lied about canceling Christmas. She confessed to letting Emily take the reins and not wanting to stir things up by insisting I be invited. She said they knew I'd be upset but thought I'd understand in time. What stuck with me most was a single line. About halfway down, "We didn't think it would hurt you so badly. We assumed you'd be used to it by now." I stared at that sentence until the ink blurred. Used to it. Like it was normal. Like being left out was just a role I should have learned to accept. I didn't finish the letter. I folded it back up, slid it into the envelope, and placed it in the kitchen drawer with the few other things I kept from them. The drawer I didn't open anymore. That night, I received another voicemail. This time, it wasn't pleading. It was Dad. His voice was tight, controlled. The way he got when things didn't go his way. "You've made your point," he said. "We get it. You're upset. You want to teach us a lesson. Well, congratulations. Everyone's talking. Your aunt's furious. Your sister's humiliated. And your mother? She hasn't slept in days." A pause. "But don't think you're better than us, Aaron. You're not. You're just bitter. You always have been. And when this phase ends, and it will end, you'll come crawling back, just like you always do." He hung up. I didn't delete the voicemail. I replayed it once. Then again. Then I hit save. Because that was it. That was who they were. Not the tearful letters. Not the fake Instagram apologies or vague DMs from extended family. That message? That was the core. They weren't sorry for what they did. They were sorry I finally stopped letting it slide. The next day, I sat down with a notary. I updated the deed transfer for a small piece of land I had inherited from my grandfather. It was supposed to be passed to Emily after me. Dad had arranged it that way years ago, insisting it stays in the family. But it was under my name now. Full ownership. I signed the new paperwork, transferring it to a local children's charity that builds youth housing. I didn't do it out of spite. I did it because I wanted to rewrite the story. That land, that space, they didn't deserve to touch it. Let something good come from it instead. 2 days later, Emily called from a friend's phone. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail anyway. "You're ruining everything, Aaron. You're being so extra. I don't even know what you want from us anymore." She didn't get it. None of them did. I didn't want an apology. I wanted to not need one anymore. I wanted to stop playing the role of the good son, the guy who always came through, always smiled politely, always funded the lie that everything was fine. The following Friday, I received a final letter. No name on the envelope. Just my address, handwritten in the corner. Inside was a Polaroid. A group photo from Christmas night. Everyone was there. My parents, Emily, cousins, neighbors, even Aunt Meredith, holding drinks, arms slung around each other, mid-laugh. On the back, someone had written, "We still had a great time." No signature, no message, just that one line. And I smiled, because I finally understood. They weren't inviting me back. They were taunting me, trying to shame me for missing their fun, trying to make me feel small for choosing distance over dysfunction. But the truth? That photo told me everything I needed to know, because it meant they weren't over it. They were still thinking about me, still trying to prove something, still scrambling to pretend they didn't miss me. The photo stayed on my kitchen counter for a week. I didn't throw it away, not immediately. I left it there, face down, half curious if they'd send another. They didn't. And over the days that followed, something strange began to settle in me, not rage, not even sadness, but a strange kind of peace. Like I'd stepped out of a fog I didn't know I'd been living in. For the first time in my adult life, I was entirely free. No last-minute bailouts. No fake apologies. No wondering why I always felt like the one left holding the weight of everyone else's choices. And once that fog lifted, I could see the pattern clearly. It wasn't just Christmas, or rent, or some Instagram live stream. It was years. Years of being their safety net, their scapegoat, their emotional punching bag. Whenever things went wrong, I was the buffer. When Dad got into a fight with a landlord, I paid the deposit. When Emily overdrafted her account for the third time, I quietly wired her a gift. When Mom wanted to surprise everyone with a birthday cruise for Grandma, but couldn't cover all the costs, I handled it. No one ever said thank you. Not really. And now that the well had run dry, they were scrambling, because they weren't just missing me. They were missing the version of me they had molded, the one who never said no. I thought a long time about how I wanted to end things. Not just drift away, but close the door in a way that was final, undeniable, and irreversible. I opened my laptop, went into my files, and pulled up the shared Google Sheet I'd been using for years to track all the payments I'd sent them. Every rent transfer. Every gift I paid off. Every favor disguised as just helping out. $1,750 for Emily's braces. $950 for Mom's outpatient surgery deductible. $8,400 in rent over 27 months. $312 for someone's car repair, still not sure whose. I tallied it all. The final total, $38,706. I stared at that number. Nearly 40 grand. And I never once asked for it back. So, I decided to change that. Not for the money, but for the message. I wrote a letter. A real one. Printed and signed. And I sent copies to all of them. Mom, Dad, Emily, and Meredith. All the key players in this twisted little performance they called family. Here's what it said. To whom it may concern, you know who you are. This is not an apology, nor a plea for reconciliation. This is a statement of fact. Over the last several years, I have financially supported this family in ways no one should have been expected to. I did so quietly, without resentment, and always with the belief that I was doing the right thing. That belief was a mistake. I was not helping. I was enabling. What I received in return was not gratitude, but entitlement. I was not treated as a brother, a son, or a loved one. I was treated as a resource, a silent donor to your lives, a background character in your celebrations, a checkbook disguised as a relative. You lied to me. You excluded me. You gaslit me into believing that I was being dramatic for wanting basic decency. That ends now. Enclosed is an itemized summary of the funds I provided over the last 6 years. I am not requesting repayment. Consider it a formal receipt for services rendered. Services I will no longer be offering. Effective immediately, I will no longer be part of this family's group chats. I will no longer cover any expenses, debts, or emergencies. I will no longer attend any events, holidays, or gatherings. I will no longer be spoken of as the one who turned his back. I didn't. You closed the door first. Please do not contact me unless it is to acknowledge this letter and take full responsibility for your actions, without excuses, without spin, and without expecting anything in return. I have changed the locks on every door you used to slip through. I suggest you do the same for your own homes and your own hearts. Sincerely, Aaron. I attached the itemized payment log and mailed them out certified. 2 weeks passed. Silence. Then, a single email. From Mom. Subject. Just one thing it read. I read your letter. I don't agree with everything, but I see your point. I just wish you'd said something sooner. We could have fixed it. That was the closest thing I ever got to an apology. But I didn't reply, because we couldn't have fixed it. Only they could have, and they chose not to. Over and over again. So I did something I should have done a long time ago. I moved. I found a new apartment in a new city. Bigger. Brighter. With a second bedroom I planned to turn into an art studio. I started painting again. I reconnected with college friends I hadn't seen in years. I went to therapy. I booked a solo trip to Portugal. I lived. And one morning in late spring, while walking back from the farmer's market with fresh coffee and a bag of tangerines, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I let it ring out. No voicemail. No text. And I didn't care. Because I knew they were still chasing the version of me they had created. But I had finally become the version of me I wanted to be. The kind who knew his worth. The kind who knew silence isn't weakness, it's clarity. The kind who doesn't chase people who only remember his name when the bills are due. That Christmas may have been canceled, but my peace was just beginning. I was 26 the night everything finally boiled over, but I guess the story really starts years earlier. My name's Brandon, and I grew up in a house that never truly felt like mine. My biological dad left when I was young, and when my mom remarried, I tried to be optimistic. I was 10, so I thought a new dad meant more family, more love. Instead, I got a man who seemed to size me up the first time we met and silently decide I was competition. His name is Doug, and I swear he has a permanent scowl carved into his face. He brought his son, Tyler, into the picture too. My new stepbrother, 2 years older, the golden child from day one. The house dynamic changed fast. Suddenly, the rules bent for Tyler. If he left his stuff all over the living room, it was boys will be boys. But if I forgot to take out the trash once, Doug would give me this long lecture about being a man and pulling my weight. Mom would just sit there, quiet, like she was stuck between defending me and keeping the peace. Back then, I didn't say much. I thought if I just worked harder, got better grades, helped out around the house more, they'd see me as part of the family too. But no matter what I did, Tyler was the one who got praised. He scored average grades. He's so smart. I got straight A's. Don't get cocky. Tyler skipped practice. Doug laughed and called him independent. I missed one soccer game because I was sick. You're letting the team down. It sounds small when I say it out loud, but when it happens every single day, it starts to pile up like bricks on your chest. By the time I was in college, I basically lived 2 lives. One on campus where people liked me and treated me like an adult, and one at home where Doug acted like everything I owned somehow came from his wallet. That was the most insulting part. My grandparents on my dad's side actually paid for most of my college tuition, sent me spending money every month, and even covered my car insurance. I worked part-time jobs too, saving every bit I could. Doug never put a cent into me after I turned 18, but he never missed a chance to remind me how much I owed him for raising me. Fast forward to last month. I'd been living at home again for a while to save money for a down payment on a place of my own. I paid rent, helped with groceries, and even covered the Wi-Fi bill because Doug refused to upgrade from the cheapest plan and kept complaining about how slow it was. I didn't mind contributing. Honestly, I wanted to feel like an adult who was pulling his weight. But apparently, in Doug's mind, my contributions didn't count. It was one of those Sunday dinners that started off normal enough. Tyler was there, bragging about some promotion he got. I congratulated him. I really did. But somehow that turned into Doug comparing us like he always does. He started with the usual lines, how Tyler was finally stepping up and how proud he was of him. Then, out of nowhere, Doug locked eyes with me and said, "You'll never be half the man your stepbrother is." I laughed at first, because honestly, what do you even say to that? But something in me just snapped. Years of holding my tongue boiled over, and before I knew it, I was standing. "Good," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "Let him pay your bills then, because I'm done." The whole table went silent. My mom's fork clattered against her plate. She blinked at me and said, "What are you talking about? We haven't seen a cent from you." That was it, the spark that lit the fuse. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Years of payments, groceries, covering utilities, and she thought I'd been freeloading this whole time? I didn't yell, but I think the quiet, sharp edge in my voice scared them more than if I had. I just stood there for a moment, my hands flat on the table, breathing slow and steady. The silence was thick, like even the air was holding its breath. Tyler was the first to break it, leaning back in his chair with that smug little smirk he's been perfecting since middle school. "Dude, you don't even pay rent," he said casually, like he was stating some undeniable fact. I turned to him, slowly. "I pay rent every single month," I said, my voice still calm but colder now. $200. Cash. To Mom. Mom's face scrunched up like I'd just started speaking another language. "That's not rent," she said, waving her hand like I was being ridiculous. "That's just to help out with groceries." I couldn't help it. I laughed, and it wasn't a happy laugh. "Groceries? Mom, I do the grocery shopping. I buy the groceries." With my card, I reached into my wallet and pulled out one of the receipts I hadn't tossed yet. This one from just 3 days ago. That's $176.42 for the week's food. Paid for by me. And you're telling me you haven't seen a cent? Doug crossed his arms and leaned back like he was watching a TV show he'd seen 100 times and already knew the ending. You're overreacting. Everyone chips in. That's what families do. Families also acknowledge when someone's helping. I shot back. My voice cracked a little, which made me even angrier, because it wasn't just anger, it was hurt. You've been acting like I've been freeloading here while I'm literally paying for half this house to function. Doug's face darkened. Watch your tone, he said sharply, like I was 10 years old again. I didn't sit back down. Something in me refused. No, I said quietly. I've been watching my tone my whole life in this house. I'm done doing that. Tyler rolled his eyes and muttered something under his breath, but I caught it. Drama queen. That was it. I turned to him, and for the first time in my life, I didn't swallow it down. You think I'm dramatic? You get a brand new truck last year, paid for with family money, while I'm busting my back saving for a used apartment. You don't pay a single bill here, and somehow I'm the problem. Tyler shrugged, grinning. I earned that truck. Dad said. Exactly, I cut him off. Dad said, not Mom, not me, and not his money, either, because last I checked, Doug, you're still paying off your own car loan. That hit him. His jaw tightened, but before he could say anything, Mom jumped in. Brandon, that's enough. You're being ungrateful. Doug has done so much for you over the years. What exactly? I asked, genuinely curious. I wasn't yelling, but my voice was louder now, almost shaking. What exactly has he done for me? Because from where I'm standing, my grandparents paid for my tuition. I paid for my gas. I paid for my car insurance. I paid for my phone bill. I pay for Wi-Fi. I pay for the food we eat. So please, explain to me what I'm supposed to be grateful for. Mom opened her mouth, closed it again. For the first time all night, she didn't have an answer. Doug stood up now, trying to reassert control. You're crossing a line, son. I'm not your son, I said flatly. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Mom flinched. Tyler stopped smirking. And for a second, even Doug didn't have a comeback. That night, I didn't sleep much. I stayed in my room, scrolling through months of bank transactions and receipts on my phone, almost obsessively. I didn't want to just be angry. I wanted proof. Evidence. The next morning, I taped every single grocery receipt, every Wi-Fi bill, and every transfer I'd made to Mom for groceries onto a sheet of paper. When I was done, I had a stack that looked like I was preparing for a court case. I left it on the kitchen table before I left for work. When I got back that evening, it was gone. In its place was a short note in Mom's handwriting. We need to talk tonight. Dinner was tense. Tyler wasn't there, thank God. It was just me, Mom, and Doug. They waited until after we ate, which almost made it worse, like they were buttering me up for something. Mom started. We saw your evidence, she said carefully, like she was picking each word out of a minefield. And yes, you've contributed more than we realized. More than you realized? I repeated. Mom, that's literally half your bills every month. Doug held up his hand. Look, nobody's saying you haven't helped. But this attitude, it's not acceptable. You can't just throw it in our faces. I laughed again, that same bitter laugh from the night before. So let me get this straight. I quietly pay for everything. No one notices, no one thanks me. And when I finally say something, I'm the one with the attitude. Doug's face hardened. If you don't like it here, you're free to leave. There it was. The line he'd been holding back for years. Mom didn't stop him this time. She just sat there, looking at me with this mix of sadness and was it guilt? I couldn't tell. I stood up. Fine, I said simply. I will. Doug smiled like he'd just won something. Good. Maybe then you'll learn how hard it is to be a man. That stuck with me the rest of the night, not because it hurt, but because it made me realize something. Doug didn't want me to be a man. Not really. He wanted me to stay the kid he could lecture, control, and guilt trip. The second I stood up for myself, I stopped being useful to him. But I wasn't done. Not yet. Over the next few days, I started making quiet changes. I canceled the Wi-Fi account that was under my name. I transferred the utilities I'd been paying back into theirs. I stopped buying groceries, stopped filling the pantry like I always did. I wasn't rude about it. I just stopped doing it. And that's when the cracks started to show. By the end of the week, the fridge was nearly empty. Doug tried to blame me for forgetting to shop, but I just shrugged and said, "Oh, I figured you'd handle it since you're the man of the house." The look on his face was priceless. Then the Wi-Fi cut off. Tyler apparently called Mom from work in a panic because he couldn't finish some project without it. Doug stormed into my room that night, demanding to know what happened. I didn't even look up from my laptop. "You said I was free to leave," I said. "So I left. Just not physically yet." He stood there, red-faced, for a solid 10 seconds before slamming my door so hard the frame rattled. But I knew this was just the beginning. If I was going to really make a point and protect myself in the process, I had to be smart about what came next. And what happened a few days later set the stage for everything that followed. And it was bigger than anything I could have planned. The next few days felt like living in a different house entirely. The silence was heavy, like the walls themselves were waiting for something to happen. Mom barely spoke to me except to ask if I was coming to dinner. Doug kept his distance, but I could feel his glare on me every time we crossed paths. Tyler, on the other hand, was loving it. He started leaving little notes on the fridge, shopping list, "Thanks, little bro," or "Wi-Fi please," with a smiley face. He was trying to get under my skin, but I didn't take the bait. By Friday, though, I could tell things were coming to a head. I walked into the kitchen that evening and saw Mom sitting at the table with a stack of envelopes. She looked exhausted, like she'd aged a year in a week. "We got the utility bills," she said without looking up. "Yeah." I leaned against the counter. "They've doubled since last month." I raised an eyebrow. "Not my problem anymore. You and Doug said I was freeloading, so I decided to stop freeloading." That made her look up. "Don't be smart with me, Brandon. This is serious. We can't afford this right now." I crossed my arms. "Then maybe Doug can ask Tyler to be a man for once." Her face fell, and for a second I almost felt bad, but then I remembered every time I'd been told to stay quiet. Every time Doug had lectured me while Tyler got away with everything, and that sympathy dried up fast. Saturday morning was the real turning point. I had the weekend off work, so I slept in a bit. When I came downstairs, my room door was standing wide open, which was strange because I always kept it closed. My stomach sank. Inside, my dresser drawers were open, my laundry basket tipped over, and my desk was a mess. My laptop was still there, but its charger was missing. So were two of my video games, a pair of sneakers, and, I swear my heart actually skipped a beat, the envelope where I kept my down payment savings. Months of careful saving, gone. I tore through the room just to be sure, but it wasn't there. I practically flew down the stairs. Mom was in the living room, folding laundry. "Where's my envelope?" I asked, louder than I meant to. She looked up, startled. "What envelope?" "You know what envelope. The one in my desk drawer. It had over $3,000 in it." Her mouth opened, closed. She didn't answer. Doug came in from the garage right then, holding a wrench, like he'd been working on something. "What's with the yelling?" I turned on him. "Did you go in my room?" He didn't even flinch. "Yes." That stopped me cold. "You what?" "You don't pay enough to have privacy in this house," he said flatly. "We needed to see if you had anything stashed away. And looks like you did." My blood went cold. "What did you do with my money?" He smirked, actually smirked. "Consider it rent." I swear the room spun for a second. My hands were shaking so hard, I had to grip the back of the couch to steady myself. "You stole my money." "Don't use that word," Mom said quickly, standing up now. "It's not stealing, Brandon. We just borrowed it. We're behind on some bills and Tyler's car payment is due and..." "Tyler's car payment." My voice cracked on the word. "You took my savings to pay for Tyler's truck?" Mom flinched, but she didn't deny it. I laughed. This hollow, humorless laugh that didn't even sound like me. "Unbelievable. You actually proved my point better than I ever could." Doug stepped closer, towering over me. "Watch yourself. You're still under my roof." "Not for long," I said quietly, my whole body shaking now, not from fear, but from rage. I stormed back upstairs and slammed my door, my mind racing. I couldn't believe it. Not just that they'd taken the money, but that they didn't even seem sorry. They acted like it was their right. Like everything I had belonged to them by default. For the rest of the day, I stayed in my room. Every time I heard Tyler's voice downstairs, laughing like nothing was wrong, it made my blood boil. Around dinner time, I heard him say, loud enough for me to catch it through the door, "Guess I don't have to worry about my truck getting repossessed now." Thanks, bro. I think that was the moment something in me clicked. This wasn't just unfair, it was betrayal. Deep, personal betrayal from the people who were supposed to have my back. That night, I packed a bag. Not everything, Just enough for a few days. I didn't want to tip them off completely, not yet. I needed time to figure out my next move. When I left for work the next morning, I didn't come back. I stayed at a friend's place across town, someone I trusted, and told him everything. He was furious on my behalf, but he also gave me some advice that stuck. Don't just blow up on them. Make them feel it where it hurts, but make it clean. No one can call you the bad guy if you do it smart. So that's what I decided to do. The next time I walked back into that house, I wasn't just angry Brandon anymore. I was calm, focused. Every word I spoke was measured. And the look on Doug's face when he saw me like that, not yelling, not crying, just stone cold, told me he realized something. I wasn't playing their game anymore. But then came the final straw, the act that took this from betrayal to all-out war. It was Tuesday night. I had just gotten back from the bank where I'd opened a new account and changed all my direct deposits. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed something strange. Tyler's truck was parked crooked, almost blocking the garage. Inside the house, voices were raised. I paused in the hallway, listening. Told you he'd overreact, Tyler was saying. He'll get over it, Doug replied. He doesn't have anywhere else to go. And if he does leave, we can use his room for storage. Then Mom's voice, quieter, almost hesitant. What about his job? His boss called earlier. He left a message saying Brandon didn't show up today. He's never missed a shift before. Oh, that, Doug said casually. I called his boss. Told him Brandon was going through some stuff and might not be a good fit right now. Better to cut him loose before he causes problems. I froze. My hands went numb. He called my boss. He actually sabotaged my job. I stepped into the living room then, and the look on their faces, Doug's smug satisfaction, Tyler's faint amusement, Mom's guilty wince, told me everything I needed to know. You called my boss. My voice was so quiet it scared even me. Doug shrugged. You were getting out of control. You need some humility, Brandon. This is for your own good. That was the moment the last bit of whatever tie I had left to this family snapped. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I just nodded slowly, like I'd finally solved a puzzle that had been haunting me my entire life. Okay, I said simply. Okay. And I walked upstairs, closed my door, and started planning, really planning, what I was going to do next. Because this wasn't just about money anymore. This was about respect, about dignity, about finally standing up after years of being told to sit down. And when I was done, they wouldn't just lose me. They'd lose the illusion that they had any control over me at all. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my chest so tight it felt like someone was sitting on me. I kept replaying Doug's voice in my head, calm, dismissive, like he had every right to call my boss and tank my job. Like I was still 10 years old and had to be taught a lesson. By the time the sun started to rise, I'd made my decision. I couldn't stay in that house any longer. Not for another night. Not even for another hour. I got up quietly, packed the rest of my clothes, my laptop, anything I couldn't stand to lose. Every zipper sounded like thunder in the early morning quiet. I half expected Doug to barge in and demand to know what I was doing, but the house stayed silent. When I was done, I took one last look at my room, at the walls I'd painted, the shelves I'd put up myself, the space that had been my only refuge for years, and then I shut the door softly behind me. I didn't leave a note. They didn't deserve one. The drive to my friend Eric's apartment felt unreal, like I was watching someone else's life through a car window. When I got there, Eric just nodded like he'd been expecting me. He didn't ask questions. He just helped me bring my bags in and handed me a spare key. You can stay as long as you need, he said simply. I thanked him, but it felt hollow, because as much as I was relieved to be out of that house, I couldn't shake the weight in my chest. I'd lost my savings, my job, and whatever scraps of trust I'd had left in my family, all in the span of a week. The first few days were the worst. I'd wake up in the morning, stare at my phone, and have to resist the urge to text my mom. Not to forgive her, just to see if she'd reach out, to see if she'd apologize. She didn't. The only messages I got were from Tyler, and they were as obnoxious as ever. Hope you're having fun playing house with your friend, one read. Truck payment cleared today, winky face, said another. I didn't reply to any of them. Instead, I focused on survival. I spent hours updating my resume, calling old coworkers, checking job boards. Losing that job stung, not just financially, but because I'd actually liked it. My boss had always been fair with me. I almost called him to explain what happened, but I stopped myself. If Doug was willing to interfere once, Who knew what he'd say next to try to discredit me? In the evenings, Eric and I would sit on his balcony with takeout containers between us. He mostly let me sit in silence, but every so often, he'd say something that snapped me out of my spiral. "You know," he said one night, "this might be the best thing that ever happened to you." I gave him a look. "I just lost everything I've been working for." "Yeah," he said with a shrug. "But now you know exactly where you stand. No more illusions. No more wasting energy trying to win over people who never planned on giving you credit in the first place." I hated that he was right. The longer I stayed away, the more I started to see how warped my life in that house had been. I didn't have to brace myself for a lecture every time I walked into the kitchen. I didn't have to hear Doug's snide comments about being a man or Tyler's lazy insults. For the first time in years, I could breathe. But the anger didn't go away. If anything, it grew sharper. Every time I opened my banking app and saw my drained savings account, I felt it flare again. Every time I remembered Doug's smug face as he told me I'd learn how hard it is to be a man, I felt it all over. Then, about a week after I left, Mom called. I stared at the screen for a long moment before I answered. "Brandon," she said, her voice cautious. "Yeah. Can we talk?" I didn't say anything, so she kept going. "It's been quiet around here. Tyler misses you." I almost laughed. "Tyler misses having someone to blame for everything." She sighed. "Look, we didn't mean for things to get so out of hand. Doug was just trying to teach you responsibility. He stole my money, Mom." There was a pause. "We were going to pay it back." "When?" "After Tyler's next vacation? After the next truck upgrade." Silence again. "I can't keep doing this," I said finally. "I'm not coming back." Her voice trembled a little then. "Brandon, please. We're still family." "Family doesn't do what you did," I said quietly. "At least not the kind of family I want to have." I hung up before she could reply. That night, something shifted in me. The sadness was still there, but it wasn't the heavy, suffocating sadness from before. It was sharper now, almost electric. For the first time, I wasn't just thinking about surviving this. I was thinking about what came next. I started writing everything down: dates, amounts, what they'd taken, what they'd said. I gathered screenshots of every transfer, every bill I'd covered, every receipt. It felt obsessive, but it also felt good, like I was building something. I also started looking into legal options. I wasn't sure if I had a case. After all, they'd technically been living with me when I gave them the money for groceries, but I wanted to know my rights. I reached out to a local legal aid office and set up a consultation. While I waited for the appointment, I doubled down on job hunting. I landed 2 interviews by the end of the week. Nothing fancy, but enough to get me back on my feet. I also opened a separate savings account, one they couldn't touch even if they tried. And slowly, piece by piece, I started to feel like myself again. But then, just when I was beginning to breathe a little easier, Mom showed up at Eric's apartment. It was a Sunday afternoon, and I'd just gotten back from one of the interviews. Eric opened the door and gave me a look that said, "You'd better deal with this." Mom was standing there with a plastic container of food, my favorite lasagna. She looked tired, but not angry. "Can we talk?" she asked. I hesitated, but let her in. We sat at the kitchen table, and she started slow. "Doug thinks you're being dramatic," she said. I raised an eyebrow. "Of course he does. But I think," she hesitated, "I think we made a mistake." I didn't say anything. "I miss you," she admitted. "I know you were helping more than we gave you credit for. But Doug says you still owe the house rent for the months you stayed there." I blinked. "You took my savings, and now you think I owe you more?" She flinched, but didn't deny it. "You were still living there, Brandon." It was almost funny at this point. Almost. I stood up and grabbed the folder I'd been putting together, the one with every receipt, every bank statement. I dropped it on the table with a heavy thud. "That's what I paid," I said flatly. "Add it up. If you still think I owe you after that, then we can take it to court." Her eyes widened, and for the first time, I saw fear flash across her face. She didn't say anything else, just left the lasagna on the table and walked out. And as the door clicked shut behind her, I realized something. I wasn't at rock bottom anymore. I was climbing out of it, and I was doing it on my own terms. But I also knew this wasn't over. Not even close. Because something told me Doug wasn't going to let this go quietly. And I was ready for whatever came next. The week after Mom's visit was a turning point. For the first time in months, I woke up feeling clear-headed. It wasn't like all the pain had disappeared. Far from it. But I finally felt like I had something to work toward. instead of just something to run from. I started by throwing myself into rebuilding my life from the ground up. My second interview went well, better than I'd expected, actually. It was for a logistics coordinator role at a mid-sized company across town. The hiring manager was direct but fair, and she seemed genuinely impressed when I explained how I'd managed household budgeting for years, balancing bills and expenses for 3 adults while holding a part-time job and going to school. "Sounds like you've got real-world management experience," she said with a smile. "You'd be surprised how many applicants don't know how to keep things organized." I walked out of that interview feeling lighter. By the end of the week, I got the call. They wanted to offer me the position. It paid better than my old job, had benefits, and even had a chance for advancement. When I told Eric, he actually clapped me on the back. "That's it, man. That's your way out. Start stacking cash and get your own place." And that's exactly what I did. I cut every expense I could, ate cheap, stayed in, even picked up a few extra shifts when they were offered. The first paycheck I got from that new job felt like a declaration of independence. I opened that new savings account and transferred almost all of it in, leaving just enough for groceries and gas. Slowly but surely, things started falling into place. By the end of the second month, I'd saved back almost half of what Doug had stolen from me. My confidence was coming back too. I started going to the gym with Eric a few times a week, just to get out of my head and channel some of the frustration somewhere productive. It was rough at first. I'd never been much of a gym guy, but after a few weeks, I started to notice small changes. My posture was straighter. My clothes fit better. I felt stronger, literally and figuratively. The change didn't go unnoticed. One afternoon, I ran into an old classmate at the grocery store. She did a double take and said, "Wow, Brandon, you look good." Like, good. It threw me off for a second, but as I walked back to my car, I couldn't stop smiling. It wasn't just my appearance that was improving, though. My mindset was changing too. The bitterness was still there, but it wasn't consuming me anymore. Instead, it was fueling me, pushing me to build something better. I also kept meticulous track of every single document I'd gathered about my time living at Mom and Doug's house. It had started as just a way to keep myself busy, but now it felt like I was building a weapon, not a physical one, but one that could cut through every lie they'd ever told about me freeloading or not contributing. Then, one Friday night, I got a text from Mom. "Can we talk?" I hesitated, but curiosity got the better of me. She called me a few minutes later. "Doug wants to have a family meeting," she said carefully. "He thinks it's time we clear the air." I almost laughed. "Clear the air? Is that what he calls it?" "Brandon, please," she said softly. "I miss you." There was something in her voice that sounded almost desperate. I agreed to meet them, not because I wanted to reconcile, but because part of me wanted to see how far they'd go. When I walked into the house that Sunday, it felt strange. The air smelled like the roast Mom always made on special occasions, but there was a tension underneath it, like everyone was bracing for a storm. Doug was sitting at the head of the table, arms crossed. Tyler was there too, scrolling through his phone like he couldn't be bothered to look up. Doug started talking the second I sat down. "You've made your point," he said gruffly. "We know you were contributing more than we thought. But this, staying away, refusing to help, it's gone on long enough." I didn't say anything, just let him keep going. "You're still part of this family," he said. "And part of being a family is pulling your weight." I pulled out my folder and slid it across the table. "That's me pulling my weight," I said flatly. "Every grocery receipt, every Wi-Fi bill, every transfer. If you still think I didn't do enough after looking at that, then I don't know what to tell you." Doug glanced at it, but didn't open it. "You can't put a price on living under my roof," he said. "That's funny," I replied, "because you literally put a price on it when you took my savings." His jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. Tyler finally spoke up then. "So what? You're just gonna hold this grudge forever? You're acting like some martyr when all you had to do was follow the house rules." I turned to him. "House rules? Like what?" "Keep quiet while you get everything handed to you. Maybe if you weren't so bitter all the time." "Enough," I cut him off. "I didn't come here to fight. I came here to say this. I'm not coming back. Not now, not ever. I'm saving for my own place. I have a better job. I don't need this anymore." Doug laughed then, this short, dismissive sound. "You think you can do better on your own? You wouldn't last a month without us." I smiled, not the bitter smile from before, but a real one this time. Funny, because it's been 2 months already, and I've never been doing better. The look on his face was priceless, like he'd just realized I wasn't bluffing. I left right after that, and this time, I didn't feel heavy walking out the door. I felt powerful. The next few weeks flew by. My job started giving me more responsibility. I even got a small bonus for catching a scheduling error that could have cost the company thousands. My boss pulled me aside and said, "Good eye, Brandon. Keep this up, and we might have a team lead position for you soon." When I told Eric, he grinned. "You realize what this means, right? You're not just surviving anymore. You're winning." And he was right. I started going apartment hunting seriously now. I had enough saved for a deposit and the first month's rent. I found a small but clean one-bedroom not too far from work, and when I signed the lease, I felt like I was signing the first page of a new chapter in my life. Moving day was surreal. I didn't even tell Mom or Doug. I just packed up the last of my things from Eric's and set up my new place. When I sat down on the floor that night, eating cheap takeout with boxes still all around me, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. But I wasn't done. Because as good as it felt to build this new life, there was still unfinished business with Doug and Tyler. They hadn't learned anything. Not really. And deep down, I knew that until they faced the consequences of what they'd done, they'd just keep doing it to someone else. So as I unpacked my things and set up my little apartment, I started planning. Not out of anger, not anymore, but out of something colder, sharper. It was time to make sure they finally understood that I wasn't their scapegoat anymore. And when the opportunity finally came, when the perfect storm lined up, I was ready. A few weeks after I moved into my apartment, I started to notice something interesting. The calls from Mom were becoming more frequent. At first, it was just the occasional text, "How are you?" or "Did you eat?" But then she started actually calling, sometimes late at night, when I could tell she'd been crying. "Things have been tense around here," she said during one of those calls. "Doug is angry all the time. Tyler's been snapping at him too. The bills are piling up." I didn't gloat, even though part of me wanted to. Instead, I just listened. And the more I listened, the clearer it became that without my contributions, the household had started to strain. Grocery costs were higher than Doug expected. Tyler had missed a car payment because he spent too much on a weekend trip with his friends, which caused an argument so loud the neighbors complained. I kept my voice calm, almost casual. "Maybe it's time Tyler starts helping out more," I said. Mom sighed. "You know how Doug is. He thinks Tyler needs to focus on his job and not worry about the house." I almost laughed. Funny, I had a job when I lived there, and that never stopped him from expecting me to pay for everything. She didn't respond to that. Around that time, I got promoted to team lead at work. It came with a raise, better hours, and, most importantly, more control over my schedule. It was a huge confidence boost, and it also freed up more time for me to focus on getting my financial life in order. I met with a lawyer at the legal aid office, bringing my carefully compiled folder of receipts and bank statements. He flipped through it, occasionally raising an eyebrow. "You've got a solid paper trail," he said. "It's tricky, because technically you were giving them money voluntarily, but if you can prove they took the savings without your consent, you might have a small claims case." That lit a fire in me. I wasn't sure if I would actually go through with filing a claim, but just knowing I had the option gave me leverage. Meanwhile, I started hearing more through the grapevine about Doug and Tyler. Word travels fast in a small town, and apparently Doug had been bragging at the hardware store that he put me in my place, and that I'd come crawling back any day now. That made me smile, because nothing could be further from the truth. Then something happened that gave me the perfect opportunity. I was at work one afternoon when my boss mentioned an upcoming contract that would require outside help for a big shipment. "We're looking for a reliable subcontractor," she said. "Someone local, small business, affordable. Know anyone?" That's when it clicked. Doug's side business, the one he'd been running for years doing delivery and hauling jobs, was exactly the kind of business my company would hire for something like this. And suddenly, I realized I had something powerful: influence. I didn't say anything right away. I just asked for the details and made a mental note to keep an eye on when the final decision would be made. That night, I called Mom back. Tyler answered instead, his tone mocking from the first word. "Look who it is. You ready to apologize and come home yet?" I smiled to myself. "No, Tyler. I'm calling to tell Mom something important." "She's busy," he said. "Then tell her this. I have a new job. I just got promoted, and I'm doing better than ever." There was a pause on the line. "Good for you," he said sarcastically. "Want a medal?" "No," I said evenly. "But you might want to tell Doug." I have some connections now that he might find useful. I hung up before he could reply. A few days later, Mom called me back. This time, she sounded different, almost nervous. Doug heard what you said to Tyler, she said. He wants to know what you meant. I kept my tone light. Just that I'm in a position to help him. Or not. Silence stretched over the line. Brandon, she said finally. If you can help us, we could really use it right now. Things are tight. I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of her words sink in. This was it, the first time she'd admitted they needed me. I'll think about it, I said. But I have conditions. She didn't argue. She just said, okay. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and made a list. Not just of what I wanted from them, but of what they owed me, financially and emotionally. I wasn't just going to let them back into my life on their terms. This time, it would be on mine. Over the next week, I quietly gathered even more leverage. I asked my boss if I could sit in on the subcontractor vetting process, just to observe. She agreed, and I got a front row seat to the decision-making. Doug's business was on the list of candidates. When his proposal came in, I almost laughed out loud. It was overpriced, sloppy, and full of hidden fees. It was exactly the kind of thing that would get rejected outright. But I didn't reject it. Not yet. I kept that information to myself. Instead, I waited. Sure enough, a few days later, Mom called again. This time Doug was on speakerphone. We heard you might be able to get us a contract with your company, he said, his tone gruff, but not as smug as usual. Maybe, I said. But like I told Mom, I have conditions. What conditions? I want my savings back. Every cent. And I want an acknowledgement, from both of you, that I contributed more than you gave me credit for. No more calling me a freeloader. No more lectures about being a man. You do that, and I'll see what I can do. There was a long silence. That's blackmail, Doug said finally. No, I said calmly. That's negotiation. And for the first time in years, I heard something in Doug's voice I'd never heard before, hesitation. When I hung up, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't just reacting to them anymore. I was setting the terms. I had power now, and I wasn't afraid to use it. The next step was going to be crucial. I needed to make sure that when the tables finally turned, there'd be no going back to the way things were. And as the final contract decision approached, I started putting every piece into place. Because when it all came together, Doug and Tyler were going to learn exactly how it felt to underestimate me. The morning of the subcontractor decision meeting, I woke up earlier than usual. I brewed a pot of coffee, sat at my small kitchen table, and went over my notes one last time. Every number, every receipt, every email from my boss about the process. I reviewed it all until I could have recited it in my sleep. This wasn't just about getting even anymore. It was about making sure the narrative finally changed. For years, Doug had painted me as the ungrateful kid, the freeloader, the one who needed to learn responsibility. Today was the day that flipped for good. When I walked into the office that morning, my boss waved me into the conference room where the team was meeting. A stack of subcontractor bids sat in the center of the table. Doug's company's proposal was right on top, his company name written in bold letters. I kept my expression neutral as we went through the list. One by one, the other bids were reviewed, most of them cheaper, more professional, more thorough than Doug's. When it came time for his, I stayed quiet at first. This one is way overpriced, one of my coworkers said, flipping through the pages. And they've got a bunch of hidden fuel surcharges buried in the fine print. Yeah, this is sloppy, another added. Not a great fit. That was my moment. Can I offer some context? I said calmly. They all looked at me. I know the owner personally, I continued. And I can tell you, they have a reputation for cutting corners. I've seen it firsthand. Missed deadlines, last-minute price hikes, jobs that weren't finished properly. I wasn't lying. I'd seen Doug pull all of those stunts before, but I said it in such a calm, professional tone that it didn't sound personal. Good to know, my boss said, scribbling something in the margin. That's exactly the kind of headache we don't want for this job. And just like that, Doug's proposal went into the discard pile. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I just sat there, quiet and professional, as we picked a different subcontractor, a smaller, hungrier business run by a guy I knew would knock it out of the park. When the meeting was over, I stepped outside into the bright afternoon sun and let myself breathe. My hands were steady. My heart wasn't racing. This wasn't the shaky, explosive anger from months ago. This was something colder, calmer. It felt good. That evening, I waited until after dinner time to make my move. I called Mom's phone. Doug answered. Well, he said, no greeting, just that one word. They went with another subcontractor, I said simply. There was silence on the other end. Then, you did this, he said, his voice low and sharp. I didn't make your proposal overpriced, I replied. I didn't put hidden fees in your contract. I just told the truth when they asked me about you. You ruined us. No, I said, my voice calm. I just stopped letting you ruin me. I could almost hear him grinding his teeth through the phone. You'll regret this, he said finally. I already did, I said. For years. But not anymore. I hung up before he could say anything else. Over the next few days, the fallout started to trickle in. Mom texted me first, saying Doug was furious and Tyler was calling me every name in the book. I didn't reply. Then something unexpected happened. The owner of the smaller subcontractor my company hired called me personally to thank me. This contract is a game changer for us, he said. You just kept my guys working for the next 3 months. I hung up smiling. Not only had I stopped Doug from profiting off me again, but I'd helped someone else succeed in the process. But I wasn't done. The next step was getting my savings back. I filed a claim in small claims court, attaching every receipt and statement I had. I knew it might not get me everything, but even the act of filing was a statement. I wasn't going to be intimidated into silence anymore. When the court papers were served, Mom called me crying. Brandon, how could you do this to us? You did it to yourselves, I said gently. This is just me holding you accountable. I just wanted us to be a family again, she whispered. Then you should have acted like one when I was still under your roof, I said, and ended the call. By now, word had started to spread around town. People knew something had gone down between me and Doug, and not everyone was taking his side. Apparently, one of his bigger clients heard about what happened and decided to review their own contract with him. The next time I saw Doug, at the grocery store, of all places, he looked smaller somehow. Not physically, but the arrogance was gone. He didn't yell. He didn't sneer. He just looked at me, then looked away. Tyler wasn't so quiet. He tried to confront me in the parking lot, ranting about how I'd destroyed their business and embarrassed the family. You know what's really embarrassing? I said, keeping my voice calm. Having to explain to the judge why you thought stealing my savings was okay. He didn't have a comeback for that. Walking away from that conversation, I felt taller, lighter, like I'd finally stepped out of a shadow I didn't even realize I'd been living under. But the best part? I wasn't angry anymore. Because the revenge wasn't about punishing them. Not really. It was about reclaiming my power, my dignity, and my life. And I'd done that. Still, I knew there was one final chapter left. The moment where everything would come to a head, where Doug and Mom would finally have to face me, not as the kid they could control, but as an adult who didn't owe them anything. And when that moment came, I was ready to look them in the eye and say the one thing I'd been holding in for years. 2 weeks later, the court date finally came. I showed up early, dressed in my best button-down and clean shoes. My hands were steady as I checked in with the clerk and sat down on the bench outside the courtroom. Doug and Mom walked in together a few minutes later. Doug's face was red, his jaw tight, but he didn't look at me right away. Mom looked tired, almost drained, like the past few months had worn her down completely. Tyler wasn't there. Apparently he had work, but I suspected he just didn't want to face me. When our case was called, we stood before the judge. I presented my folder of evidence, every receipt and bank transfer neatly organized. I spoke clearly, calmly, explaining how I'd contributed to the household, how I'd saved for months, and how Doug had taken the money without my consent. Doug tried to interrupt several times, but the judge cut him off. You'll have your turn, she said sternly. When Doug finally did speak, it was the same speech I'd heard my whole life. He was living under my roof, eating my food, using my electricity. That money was rent he owed. He's just trying to punish us for giving him tough love. The judge flipped through my folder and raised an eyebrow. These receipts show consistent contributions toward groceries and utilities. That would generally be considered rent or at least shared expenses. And you admit you took the savings? Doug hesitated, then muttered, Yes, but. No buts, the judge said sharply. You don't get to help yourself to someone else's money without their consent. I'm ordering you to return the full amount. Doug's face went crimson. Mom's eyes welled with tears. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I just nodded. When we walked out of the courtroom, Doug rounded on me. You happy now? You humiliated us. I turned to face him squarely. No, Doug. You humiliated yourself the day you went into my room and stole from me. This, I gestured back toward the courtroom doors, was me refusing to let you keep doing it. He opened his mouth like he wanted to say something, but nothing came out. Mom stepped closer then, her voice quiet. Brandon, I'm sorry. I looked at her for a long moment. For the first time, it actually sounded like she meant it. I believe you, I said softly. But sorry doesn't erase what happened. You chose to let him treat me like I didn't matter. And I can't come back from that. Her face crumpled, but she nodded. The court-ordered repayment came through 2 weeks later. Seeing that money land back in my account was surreal, not because of the amount, but because it felt like a line in the sand. That chapter was over. By then, my apartment was fully set up. I had furniture I'd picked out myself, a little coffee table where I kept fresh flowers, and a sense of peace that I hadn't had in years. My promotion was going well, and my boss had already hinted about giving me more responsibility. One Saturday afternoon, I decided to stop by Mom's house one last time, not to reconcile, but to close the loop. When I pulled up, the yard was overgrown, the house looking more worn than I remembered. Tyler's truck was parked in the driveway, mud splattered up the sides. I knocked on the door and waited. Doug opened it. He didn't say anything, just stared at me. I came to tell you something, I said evenly. I don't hate you. I don't even wish you harm. But I'm done being your scapegoat. I've got my own place, my own job, my own life, and you're not part of it anymore. He scowled, but there was no fight left in him. Mom appeared behind him, her eyes hopeful. Brandon, I wish you well, Mom, I said gently, but I'm not coming back. Then I turned and walked away. As I reached my car, Tyler stepped outside. So that's it. You just walk away. I looked at him over the roof of my car. Yeah, that's it. You wanted the golden child spot. Congratulations, it's all yours. Bills, tension, lectures, all of it. You can be the man of the house now. For once, he didn't have a smart remark. I got in my car, started the engine, and drove off without looking back. That night, I sat in my apartment with the windows open, the cool air drifting in. My phone buzzed with a notification. My savings account had just crossed the threshold I'd been aiming for. I poured myself a drink, leaned back on my couch, and smiled to myself. I hadn't just survived what they threw at me. I'd built something better. And the best part? I didn't owe them a single thing anymore. I raised my glass to the quiet room and said it out loud, just for me. Doug was right about one thing. I did become a man, just not the way he wanted. Then I took a long sip, feeling lighter than I ever had, and let the silence of my new life settle around me like a victory banner. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for someone else's approval. I had already won. I had a feeling this Christmas dinner would be a disaster the moment I walked in. It's not like I didn't know what I was walking into. It's always the same. But this year, I was determined to hold it together, despite everything. Let me introduce myself. I'm Maya, the youngest of 4 siblings. But being the youngest has never meant anything sweet or cute in my family. If anything, it's always been the reason they talk down to me. I'm used to it at this point. I'm 28 now, but to them, I'm still the baby. I don't have a husband or kids like my older siblings, but I've been successful in other ways. I have a career I'm proud of, a small but loyal group of friends, and a sense of independence they can't seem to grasp. For them, it's always been about marriage and kids. Nothing else matters. Christmas dinner was always a big deal for our family. It's one of the few times of the year when we all gather at my parents' house, which is this massive, old Victorian place that's been in the family for generations. It's a house that looks perfect for family photos, but is a nightmare to clean. I'd always hated the place. It's cold and distant, just like my parents. But it's tradition, so every year, I go. Even though I'd rather be anywhere else, I go. Because, family. I showed up just after everyone else. My oldest brother, Chris, was already there with his wife and 3 kids, loudly setting up the table as if they owned the place. Then there was Amy, my sister, with her husband and their baby. Always perfect, always polished, always showing off their ideal life. My parents were in the kitchen, bustling around, acting as if they had everything under control while managing to make everyone feel like they were still 5 years old. As usual, I slipped in quietly, hoping to avoid the drama that was sure to unfold. When my mom saw me, her face lit up with that fake smile she always wore. The kind that made me feel like I wasn't really welcome, but I was tolerated for the sake of the holiday. Maya, sweetie, she said, giving me a hug that felt more obligatory than affectionate. So glad you could make it. Go ahead and grab a seat. I barely had time to respond before my dad called from the other room, his voice booming with that authority he used when he wanted to remind everyone he was still the man of the house. Dinner's about ready. Chris, Amy, get the kids situated, please. I stood there for a moment, not sure what to do. I wanted to say something, but it was Christmas. I didn't want to make a scene yet. That's when my mom, in that subtle way she had of making everything feel like a lesson, spoke again. Maya, why don't you sit at the kids' table? We've got a special spot for you there, with the cousins. I froze. I couldn't believe it. My mom, with her sweet, saccharine tone, had just asked me to sit at the kids' table, the one they set up every year with a mismatched array of chairs, paper plates, and half-hearted decorations. I glanced over to the dining room. The adults' table was set up beautifully, with fancy china, glasses of wine, and candles that gave the whole thing an elegant, grown-up vibe. There, at the head of the table, was my dad, looking as smug as ever, surrounded by my married siblings. No room for me, though. I looked back at my mom, trying to hold back the anger bubbling inside me. I could feel the familiar sting, the one I always got when they tried to remind me that I wasn't good enough in their eyes. It wasn't the first time they'd made me feel small, but this was different. This wasn't just a little comment or a side-eye. This was deliberate. They knew what they were doing. I forced a smile, but it didn't reach my eyes. Sure, Mom. Thanks, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She smiled, too, but there was something in her expression, something that said she didn't really care about how I felt. This was all about keeping up appearances, making sure everything was perfect. I don't think she even realized how much it hurt to be dismissed like that. Without saying another word, I walked over to the kids' table, my stomach turning with every step. It wasn't like I expected anything better, but for a second, I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd treat me like an adult. I sat down at the little plastic chair, surrounded by toddlers who were more interested in their mashed potatoes than the awkward silence I felt in the air. My cousins were in their own little world, ignoring me completely. I stared at the plates in front of me, sloppy, unappetizing. It was like they didn't even try to make it look good. I could have sworn I saw one of the toddlers drop a chunk of broccoli under the table, and I wanted to scream. That was when it hit me. This wasn't just about the table. This wasn't about tradition or the holiday spirit. This was about them seeing me as less than. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. And in that moment, something inside me snapped. I stood up quietly, the weight of the decision pressing on me. I didn't need to say anything. I didn't need to shout or make a scene. I just grabbed my coat, slung it over my shoulder, and walked straight for the door. As I opened it, my mom's voice called out, almost too late. Maya? Where are you going? She asked, her voice now laced with confusion and a hint of irritation. I didn't look back. I'm leaving, I said, my voice cold. Enjoy your dinner. The door slammed behind me. The cold air hit me like a wave, but I didn't care. My car was parked just down the street, and I was out of there, the sound of my parents' frantic calls fading in the distance. I drove for hours, aimlessly, until I finally ended up at a quiet diner, sitting in a booth by myself. I ordered something warm, my hands still shaking from the adrenaline. I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt this much rage and relief all at once. That's when my phone started blowing up. Messages, missed calls, the usual. I glanced at the screen. It was my family, Chris, Amy, even my dad, all calling and texting. But the one that stood out the most was from my mom. Where are you? We need to talk. This isn't funny, Maya. I felt a smirk tug at my lips, the kind that had been brewing all evening. I wasn't about to pick up, though. Not yet. The ball was in my court now. They had no idea what was coming. I set my phone down and sipped my coffee, watching the steam curl up into the air. What would I do next? That was the question. And trust me, they wouldn't like the answer. I sat in that diner for what felt like an eternity, my phone buzzing every few minutes. The messages grew more desperate, each one trying to reel me back into their little game. Chris sent me one first. Maya, this isn't funny. Where are you? It was followed by another from Amy. Mom is freaking out. We just want you back. Then my dad. Come on, don't act like a child. Get back here. I didn't respond. I didn't owe them an explanation. They had made their choice when they treated me like a second-class citizen at their precious dinner. All I had wanted was to be treated like an adult, but instead, they had decided I was still the baby who needed to be tucked away with the toddlers. After about an hour, I finally picked up my phone to check the messages again. The tension was starting to feel thick, like they were starting to realize I wasn't going to just roll over. Then, my mom's text popped up, and it made my stomach twist. "Maya, I don't understand why you're doing this. Your siblings are concerned, and this is ruining Christmas. Don't make this about you. You're being selfish." I stared at the message for a moment, feeling a wave of anger rise again. Selfish? They were the ones being selfish. The whole night had been about their image, their expectations. I had been nothing but a piece in their little puzzle of perfection. But to her, I was the problem. Typical. I didn't know whether I was supposed to laugh or cry at this point. Instead, I just hit the block button on her number. She wasn't going to manipulate me into feeling guilty. Not this time. I took a deep breath, trying to center myself. This wasn't just a knee-jerk reaction. I had a plan. I had been wronged by every single one of them. And tonight, I was going to make sure they knew just how much they messed up. Later that evening, after I had finished my meal and the adrenaline had worn off a bit, I decided it was time. I pulled up the family group chat, where they usually all vented about everything and anything. There were already a dozen messages about me. This is ridiculous. She's acting like a child. What's the big deal? We didn't mean it like that. I think she's just overreacting. I scrolled through them, my fingers itching. I knew I could just ignore it, but that would have been the easy way out. No, I needed them to feel it. I needed them to understand that their treatment of me had consequences. I started typing, slowly at first, but then my words picked up speed. It wasn't just about tonight. It was about everything they had done to me over the years. You guys don't get it, do you? You really don't. This isn't just about a seat at the table. It's about how you've treated me my entire life. Like I'm not good enough, like I'm invisible unless you need something from me. I'm the only one who doesn't get praised for following the same script you all did: get married, have kids, play the game. But I've built my own life, and I'm doing just fine, so maybe it's time you all recognize that. I paused before hitting send, letting the weight of my words sink in. For the first time in forever, I felt like I had control over the situation. I wasn't begging for their approval anymore. I wasn't going to be their little project. I pressed send. It didn't take long for the messages to flood in. My phone pinged over and over, each message more frantic than the last. The first one was from my dad. "Maya, this is ridiculous. You're being dramatic. Get over yourself." Amy quickly followed. "You can't just leave like that and not expect everyone to be upset. What did you think was going to happen?" Chris chimed in. "We didn't do anything wrong, Maya. You need to calm down and come back before we're all ruined by your tantrum." Each message hit harder than the last. They still didn't get it. They were still trying to pin it on me, still making it my fault that they treated me like garbage. I didn't respond. Instead, I did something I'd been thinking about for a while now. I opened up the Photos app on my phone and started scrolling. There it was, an old picture of our family, taken years ago, right before things really started to fall apart. A perfect Christmas photo, with everyone smiling and happy. Everyone except me, that is. I was there, of course, forced into the picture like an afterthought. But I knew the truth behind the smiles. I knew what had been said, what had been implied, all those years. I took that photo and, without hesitation, posted it in the family group chat. But this time, I added a caption. "Here's to the perfect family, always making sure the youngest one knows their place." Then, I turned off my phone. I let the silence settle around me, feeling like I was finally free from their chains. I didn't know what would happen next, but I didn't care. They had pushed me too far. And now, I was done. I didn't check my phone for hours. It was almost surreal, sitting there without the constant buzzing and pinging from their desperate texts. The silence was oddly calming, and I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't felt in years. For once, I wasn't the one trying to appease them. I stayed up late, just thinking. I knew what they'd be saying behind my back, even though they didn't have the nerve to say it to my face. My siblings, especially Chris, probably thought I was overreacting, thinking I was just being the drama queen of the family again. But I wasn't. I was done playing the role they had written for me, and if they couldn't understand that, well, I'd let them deal with the fallout. Eventually, I plugged my phone into charge and, with a sigh, checked it again. The notifications were as relentless as I expected. Dozens of missed calls. Texts that ranged from angry to apologetic, but all of them coded in an underlying frustration. I scrolled through them all, reading their words with a sense of grim satisfaction. They were unraveling, and I wasn't going to make it easy for them to put everything back together. My mom's text was the longest. "I don't know what's gotten into you, Maya. You're acting like this is about us when it's really about you. You can't just run away from your family like this. You're tearing us apart. Please come back. Christmas is ruined without you. This isn't who you are." There it was, the guilt trip. The attempt to twist the situation so that I was the bad guy. They always did this, made me feel like I was the one causing trouble for wanting to be treated like a grown-up. Then, my dad's message. "This is childish. We need to talk about this when you calm down." And of course, Chris, if you think walking out of the dinner was going to make a statement, you're wrong. You're making it worse. You owe us an apology. An apology? For what? For standing up for myself for once? For demanding to be seen as an equal in a family that only valued me when it suited them? No, I wasn't apologizing for anything. But then, there was Amy's message. It was different from the others. It wasn't angry or demanding. It was almost pleading. "Maya, I know you're upset, and I understand why. But this isn't the way to fix things. You're my sister, and I love you, but you're pushing everyone away. Please, just come home. We can talk about this. It's Christmas, for God's sake." I stared at her words for a while. I had always been close to Amy. She was the one who used to defend me when the others would gang up on me as a kid. But now, I wasn't sure if I could ever trust her again. Not after everything she had let slide, everything she had silently endorsed when she knew it was wrong. I took a deep breath, my thumb hovering over the screen. I wanted to respond. I wanted to explain to her that I wasn't being a diva or causing drama, that I was standing up for myself, that I was tired of being treated like the perpetual child in the family. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I typed out a short reply. "I'll think about it." I sent it and set my phone down, feeling a pang of guilt. But I shook it off. I knew I couldn't go back to that table, not without a serious change in how they viewed me. And I wasn't about to let them brush this under the rug like it was nothing. The next morning, I woke up to even more messages. Some were from family friends, asking where I was. They were genuinely concerned, but I didn't feel like explaining myself to anyone who wasn't part of the problem. And then, of course, there was a barrage of calls from my mom. But there was one message that stood out. It was from Amy again. "Maya, I've been talking to Chris and Mom. They're really upset, and honestly, so am I. We're a family. You can't just isolate yourself from us like this. If you don't come home soon, it's going to get worse. Please don't make this more complicated than it has to be. More pressure. More manipulation. And still no understanding of what I was going through." They weren't hearing me. They weren't listening. I knew what they were doing, what they always did. They were trying to guilt me into coming back. Trying to make me feel like the one causing all the problems, when in reality, it was their refusal to see me as anything more than the youngest child that had been the problem all along. I picked up my phone, opened the group chat, and stared at the screen. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I debated what to say. I wanted to make my stand, to make them understand exactly why I was done with their treatment of me. But the truth was, I wasn't sure I was ready to go back yet. Not until I was certain they had changed. Until I was certain they saw me for who I really was. And then, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was from my dad. "Maya, we need to talk. You can't just keep running away. You're going to regret this." It hit me like a ton of bricks. The same words, the same manipulative guilt trip. I could feel the tension building, like the walls were closing in around me. But I didn't respond. Not yet. The day dragged on, and with every hour, I felt the pressure of their texts, their calls, their attempts to reel me back into their orbit. But no matter how many times my phone buzzed, I kept my distance. I had made my choice, and I wasn't about to let them bully me back into the role they had cast me in. As evening approached, I found myself sitting alone, staring at the empty chair across from me, where I would have been sitting if I had gone back. A part of me, an old part, wanted to give in, to go back and make nice. It was Christmas, after all. A time for family, for togetherness. But I couldn't shake the feeling that if I went back now, it would be like admitting I wasn't worth fighting for. That all those years of being pushed aside were just fine. That they were right, and I was just being dramatic. I thought about the photo I'd posted in the group chat. The one where I was forced into a smile, shoved to the side like I was an afterthought. That picture had said everything I needed to say. I wasn't just upset about tonight. I was upset about every year they had treated me like this. Every birthday, every holiday, every family gathering where I was relegated to the backseat, never given a voice. They thought I'd just roll over and accept it, like I always had. But not this time. And then the phone rang again. This time, it was my mom. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the decline button, but something inside me told me to pick up. Maybe I was finally ready to hear what she had to say. Or maybe I was just curious how far they would go to make me feel guilty. I took a deep breath and pressed the green button. Maya, my mom's voice came through, sounding tired, exasperated. We need to talk. This has gone on long enough. I stayed silent, letting the words hang in the air. She waited for me to respond, but I didn't say anything. Look, she continued, we're family. You're making this more complicated than it needs to be. I don't know what's gotten into you, but you're pushing everyone away. Your dad is upset. Chris is upset. She paused, clearly trying to gather her words. I'm upset, Maya. I almost laughed. They were upset? After everything they had put me through, they had the audacity to say that? I could feel the old anger bubbling up, but I swallowed it down, not wanting to let her see how much she still got to me. I'm not pushing anyone away, Mom, I said, my voice calm but firm. I'm just not playing your game anymore. I'm not going to sit at the kids' table, be treated like I'm invisible, and pretend everything's fine. She was quiet for a moment. I could almost hear her processing my words, trying to figure out how to turn the conversation back into a guilt trip. You can't just leave us hanging like this. Your dad's trying to make Christmas special. The whole family is here. It's not just about you, Maya, she finally said, her voice almost pleading. You're breaking the family apart. You know, I've spent my entire life trying to make everything work, trying to fit into the mold you all created for me. But no one ever saw me, did they? I shot back. You didn't want me as an adult, Mom. You wanted me to stay the little kid forever. And tonight was the last straw. She was silent again, and I could tell it was hitting her. For the first time, she was hearing what I was really saying. It wasn't just about the seat at the dinner table. It was about how I'd been treated all my life. I'm sorry, Maya, she said finally, but her voice was soft, uncertain. I didn't know you felt that way. Yeah, well, it took me a long time to realize it, too, I replied, my voice softening just a little. But I'm done pretending. There was a long pause, and I could feel the tension in the air, even over the phone. For the first time in forever, I felt like I was finally being heard, like I had control over the situation. And it felt good. It felt empowering. Finally, she sighed. I get it. I really do. But I'm still your mother, and I just want us to be a family again. I let her words hang in the air for a moment. There was a time when I would have run back to them, desperate to make everything okay. But I wasn't that person anymore. I had learned the hard way that they would never change unless I forced them to see me as an equal. I'll think about it, I said, repeating my earlier response, but this time it was different. It wasn't about me caving in. It was about taking my time. It was about them realizing that I wasn't just some afterthought, that I wasn't going to let them pull me back into their toxic cycle without change. All right, my mom said softly. I hope you'll come back soon. I just want you to be happy. I hung up the phone and sat back, breathing deeply. It wasn't over. It wasn't a neat, clean resolution. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had taken control of the situation. I wasn't going to let them walk all over me anymore. And maybe, just maybe, they would finally see me for who I really was. I put my phone down and stared out the window, watching the snow fall softly in the darkness. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was finally free. And as for Christmas, it wasn't ruined. Because for the first time in my life, I was going to take care of me. The rest could wait. As I sat there, letting the snow fall gently outside, I couldn't help but wonder, did I do the right thing? Or did I just walk away from something that could have been fixed? Let me know in the comments. My name's Ryan. I'm 29 now, but the story I'm about to share started nearly 7 years ago, back when I was a 22-year-old college graduate, fresh into my first real job, completely oblivious to just how twisted my own family could be. I grew up in a small suburban town, the kind where everyone knew everyone and reputation stuck like gum on the bottom of your shoe. My brother, Drew, 2 years older, was the golden child, varsity athlete, class president, the one my mom proudly introduced as my perfect son. I was the quiet one, the smart one, if we're being generous. But in our household, brains never won over charm. My parents, or more specifically, my mom, always favored Drew. If I got an A, Drew C+ was still celebrated because he's under so much pressure with sports. If I got a job offer, she'd ask if it paid more than Drew's. Spoiler, it didn't, and even if it did, she'd just change the subject. My dad, he was a neutral ghost in the background, rarely standing up to mom and never getting involved in her family decisions. And those decisions usually meant Drew got what he wanted when he wanted it. I met Emily at a coffee shop downtown. She was smart, kind, and had this way of listening that made you feel like the only person in the room. We started dating during my senior year of college, and even as I graduated and moved into the whirlwind of corporate life, we stuck together. We weren't flashy, no Instagram couple nonsense, but we were solid. At least, I thought we were. My family never fully warmed up to her. My mom would constantly make little remarks like, "She's cute, but not really your level, honey." And my brother? He was civil but cold. At the time, I thought it was just the usual territorial sibling thing. Now I know better. The first real crack happened at my graduation dinner. It was supposed to be my celebration, but somehow Drew ended up giving a toast that sounded more like a resume reading of his own accomplishments. It's amazing seeing my little brother graduate. I remember when he couldn't even throw a football. He joked, making the whole table laugh. Except Emily, who gave me a sympathetic glance. I brushed it off. Drew had always needed the spotlight. I was used to dimming my own so he could shine. Looking back, that dinner was a warning shot. A few months later, Emily and I moved in together. It was a modest apartment in the city, nothing special, but we made it ours. I'd started ring shopping, quietly, slowly. I wanted it to be perfect. I hadn't told anyone yet, not even my best friend, because I knew how fast news traveled in our circles. But one night, as we were packing up to visit my parents for the weekend, Emily said something strange. "Do you think your mom actually likes me?" she asked, folding a sweater. I laughed half-heartedly. "She's just blunt. She takes time to warm up." Emily didn't laugh. She just looked down at the sweater. "It's not just her. Drew gives me this weird vibe. Like, he stares sometimes when you're not looking. Or he'll ask me strange questions. Last week he texted me asking what kind of wine I liked. Randomly. My stomach twisted. He what?" She shrugged. "It was probably nothing." But it wasn't nothing. That was the moment something inside me started watching. I became a little more alert when we were around family. I started noticing Drew's long glances. How his tone changed when he spoke to her. Too smooth, too familiar. And my mom. She'd keep inviting Drew to events we were both supposed to attend, movie nights, dinners, and then accidentally forget to tell me until the last minute, claiming she assumed I was busy with work. Then came the birthday party. Emily turned 24 in July, and I threw her a small celebration at our place. Just a few friends, cake, wine, some music. I wasn't planning to invite my family, but Emily thought it'd be a nice gesture. So I caved. My mom and Drew showed up late, unannounced, and brought a bottle of champagne that probably cost more than my rent. My mom hugged Emily tightly, too tightly, and whispered something I couldn't hear. Drew walked in like he owned the place, complimented her outfit, then joked, "You sure you're not out of his league?" Everyone laughed. I didn't. After that night, Emily seemed off. Distant. She smiled less, touched me less. I chalked it up to stress. She was applying to grad school, after all, but a quiet voice in the back of my mind whispered, "Something's wrong." Then came the proposal, or what was supposed to be. I'd planned a weekend trip. Mountains, cabin, quiet. I had the ring. I had the words. But the night before we were supposed to leave, Emily sat me down and said, "I don't think I can do this." At first, I thought she meant the trip. Then she said, "Us." I blinked. "What are you talking about?" Her voice trembled. "I know about the other girl, Ryan." My heart dropped. "What other girl?" She looked like she was trying to be brave, but her hands were shaking. "Don't lie." Drew told me. He showed me the texts. He said, "You've been cheating for months." I couldn't breathe. "Emily, I haven't. I swear on everything. I haven't." But she wouldn't look at me. "He said he caught you. He said you begged him not to tell me." The world tilted. I wanted to scream, but all that came out was a whisper. "You believe him over me?" There was silence. And in that silence, everything between us shattered. Emily moved out a week later. My mom called once, not to ask how I was, but to say, "You'll be okay, sweetie. She was never meant for you anyway." I didn't respond. Then came the final blow. 3 months after the breakup, I got a text from an old college friend. "Hey man, you seeing this?" Attached was a photo from a Facebook engagement announcement. Drew and Emily, smiling, her hand on his chest, flashing my ring. I stared at it for a long time. I thought I'd cry. Instead, I laughed. A small, hollow sound that echoed in my empty apartment. I packed a bag that night. I didn't tell anyone. I turned off my phone. And I disappeared. No texts. No emails. No explanations. Let them fill in the blanks. I just walked away from all of it. That was the end of who I used to be. And the start of something else entirely. I vanished. Not in the dramatic, burn everything down kind of way. Just quietly, deliberately. I quit my job, broke the lease, deleted every social media account I had, and bought a used sedan with what little savings I had left. I drove west, toward states I'd never seen, mountains I'd only read about, and towns where no one had ever heard the name Ryan Bennett. For the first time in my life, I didn't have to live in Drew's shadow or shrink under my mother's disapproval. It was terrifying, and it was freedom. For 2 years, I worked odd jobs and moved often. Sometimes I was a bartender, other times a barista, once even a bellhop at a ski lodge in Colorado. I learned to love silence. I read a lot. I kept a notebook, filled it with ideas. One of them, a startup concept I dreamed about in college but never had the guts to pursue, slowly began to take shape. I won't bore you with the grind, but let's just say that isolation sharpens you. And bitterness? Bitterness, when channeled right, is fuel. I taught myself code, saved obsessively, partnered with someone I met online who shared the vision, and after about 3 years, the business finally took off. It started small, then grew fast, like wildfire in a dry forest. Investors came. Partnerships followed. By 28, I wasn't just doing well. I was quietly wealthy. Quiet enough that no one back home knew a thing. But they were about to. The first time I heard from my family again was during a late summer afternoon. I was sitting in my home office, staring out over a quiet lake I now lived beside, when my phone, a new number unconnected to my past, buzzed with a random email notification. Subject line, Family Reunion, we miss you, Ryan. I stared at the name. Mom. The email was oddly cheerful, as if the past 5 years hadn't happened, as if they hadn't betrayed me, ridiculed me, thrown me aside like I was nothing. She wrote about how everyone was so excited to finally be together again, how Drew and Emily would be there with their little one. Apparently, I had a nephew, and how it wouldn't be the same without you. That was the first I'd heard of the child. I didn't respond, but that email opened a door, and soon enough, I found myself being passively watched. My old LinkedIn profile, which I'd locked and buried, had a sudden spike in views. My business, now a major player in its niche, was being followed by accounts with my family's last name. One evening, I even saw Drew's name appear briefly as a viewer on a podcast I'd done under a pseudonym. It clicked. Someone had figured it out. A few weeks later, another email arrived, this time from my father. The tone was different, stiffer, more cautious. Hey, son, I know it's been a while. Your mom told me about the reunion. She misses you. Drew. Well, he regrets how things went down. I know you probably don't want to hear from us, but maybe it's time to let go of the past. It'd mean a lot to your mother. I didn't reply. I wasn't ready. But the emails didn't stop. They came from my cousin, my aunt, even Emily, whose message simply said, I hope you're okay. I think about you sometimes. I deleted it without opening the rest. Then, something happened that shifted everything. One of my business partners forwarded me an email from an interested investor looking to arrange a meeting. They'd used my real name, the one I never advertised publicly. The message was vague, filled with flattery, but something about it felt off. I dug a little deeper, had someone on my team trace the source. It was Drew. He'd used a fake name, a burner address. Tried to pose as an investor to get in touch with me. I saw red. He wanted something, and I knew exactly what it was. A few days later, I called my old college roommate, James, one of the few people I'd kept in loose contact with. He still lived near my hometown and, more importantly, had ties to people my brother still interacted with. Hey, I said. Weird question. Have you seen Drew lately? James laughed. Man, yeah, actually. You're not gonna believe this. Guy's in debt up to his ears. Mortgage is underwater, car got repossessed, and rumor is, Emily's threatening to leave. Again. That last word, again, hit harder than I expected. Apparently, their marriage was not the fairy tale Facebook had promised. Turns out when the foundation of your relationship is betrayal and manipulation, the walls tend to crack fast. Emily had tried to launch some kind of influencer brand, but it flopped. Drew had burned through savings, made some bad investments, including a failed crypto gamble, and was now clinging to what little they had left. And worse, they'd moved back in with my parents. Of course they had. I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. But then James added, "Your mom still brags about Drew like he's God's gift to the planet. Pretends none of it's his fault. Tells everyone Emily's just going through a phase. It's pathetic." Nothing had changed. The golden child could do no wrong. And me? I was still the ghost. Until I decided not to be. The next family reunion was scheduled for early spring. An outdoor venue, rented out picnic area, all the distant cousins and second aunts, the full cast. It was the kind of event my mom lived for, social peacocking in its purest form. According to the email chain James forwarded me, Drew was supposed to be the unofficial guest of honor, with a toast planned in his name and everything. I RSVP'd, anonymously, under a fake name, just to see if they'd notice. They didn't. The weeks leading up to the reunion were strangely meditative. I didn't feel rage or even sadness anymore, just a steady, calculated calm. I pulled my old suit from the back of the closet, had it tailored, then rented a luxury car for the day, sleek, black, the kind that turns heads but doesn't scream, trying too hard. I told my assistant to clear my calendar. I booked a hotel 2 towns over. And I waited. The morning of the reunion, I arrived 10 minutes early. The venue was already filling with people. Kids running around. Distant relatives laughing. I parked the car in full view of the entrance, stepped out slowly, adjusted my jacket, and made my way toward the tables. No one recognized me at first. Not until I walked straight past the welcome booth and casually picked up a drink from the refreshment table. Then I heard it, a sharp intake of breath. "Ryan." I turned. It was Aunt Michelle, the one who used to sneak me cookies as a kid and tell me I was too sensitive when my mom snapped at me. "Oh my God, it is you." Others started turning. Whispers spread. I smiled politely, nodded once, and kept walking. Then I saw them. My mom, standing near the stage, frozen. Drew beside her, hand in his pocket, face pale. And Emily, older, wearier, still beautiful in that distant kind of way, holding a toddler on her hip, staring at me like she'd seen a ghost. I didn't break stride. I walked right up to them, opened my mouth. And then, they didn't show up. Not at first. A rustle of conversation passed through the crowd. My mom's phone buzzed. She read a message, then her expression soured. "Their car broke down," she muttered. 2 blocks away. Of course it did. I glanced at the black luxury car parked near the gate, sunlight gleaming off the polished hood. Every eye was on me now. And for the first time in years, I didn't shrink. I smiled and waited. The silence that followed was almost theatrical. I stood there, drink in hand, the weight of every whisper and stare pressing against my back like a slow-building wave. But I didn't move. I didn't flinch. If anything, I let them look, let them wonder. My mother, of course, was the first to try and recover. She moved toward me with that signature tight-lipped smile she always wore when trying to appear gracious, the one that never reached her eyes. "Ryan," she said, her tone overly bright, like I was some distant cousin who'd RSVP'd last minute. "We're so glad you could come." I sipped my drink, paused, then answered, "Are you?" Her expression faltered for half a second, and then she leaned in for a hug that I didn't return. She smelled like expensive hairspray and old perfume. The same scent she wore at every school function she'd only half listened through. Before she could say more, a car horn beeped twice in the distance. Heads turned toward the street bordering the park entrance. A beat-up silver minivan, unmistakably theirs, rolled into view, sputtering as it lurched to a stop at the curb. The driver's door swung open, and Drew stepped out, looking both flustered and furious, like he couldn't decide who to blame for being late. Then Emily stepped out behind him, lifting their toddler with one arm and slamming the passenger door with the other. Drew spotted me almost instantly. His jaw clenched, and his pace slowed. For a moment, I thought he might turn around and leave. But no, he squared his shoulders and started walking toward the gathering with that same smug confidence he'd carried since we were kids. The confidence of someone who always had backup. Someone who thought he'd never lose. And to be fair, he hadn't. Not really. Until now. As he approached, I noticed something subtle but telling. Emily wasn't walking beside him. She lagged behind, hanging back with the kid. And she was staring at me the entire time. Not at my clothes. Not at the car. At me. Drew extended a hand. Didn't think you'd show. I looked at it, then back at him. Neither did you, apparently. He forced a laugh. Car trouble. You know how it is. Not really. I replied, letting the smile curl slowly. Mine runs fine. The silence between us stretched just long enough to be uncomfortable. Then he dropped his hand and gave a stiff nod. Look, I know there's history, but maybe today we let that go, yeah? Just family stuff. No drama. That word. Family. It hit different when it came from him. Before I could respond, my mom stepped between us like a diplomat rushing to prevent war. Let's not turn this into a scene. We're here to celebrate. All of us. And Ryan, honey, you being here means so much. Really. I studied her. The same woman who, years ago, told me Emily was never meant for you anyway, with a straight face. Who'd smiled through the cracks in my life like they were decorative. But I wasn't here for apologies. Not yet. The event went on in awkward waves. I floated through the afternoon like a ghost in a place I no longer belonged to. People greeted me with a mix of confusion and politeness. Cousins I hadn't seen in years gave me half-hearted hugs, clearly unsure how to approach the missing Bennett brother. But I smiled, small and polite, never offering more than was necessary. And then came the speech. My mom tapped a fork to her wine glass and stood up near the front of the picnic area, her tone syrupy with performative cheer. I just want to thank everyone for coming today. It means the world to see our whole family, finally, back together. And especially, she paused for effect, my sons. Drew, of course, who's had such a challenging year but continues to inspire us with his strength, and Ryan, who surprised us all by showing up after, well, a little time away. I felt every eye swing toward me like searchlights. She kept going. Families go through things. Hard things. But we're strong. We forgive. And we move forward. That's what today is all about. Forgive? That word almost made me laugh. But I didn't interrupt. I just watched. Drew was next. He didn't even wait for a cue. He just stood, raised his glass, and launched into one of his rehearsed little monologues, the kind that always earned applause from our relatives. I just want to say how thankful I am, he said, making deliberate eye contact with each table, like some local politician. We've been through a lot, but what matters is that we're here, together. And whatever happened in the past, he glanced at me then, we're still brothers. That never changes. Applause followed. Too much of it. Too loud. Like they were trying to clap away the tension. I stayed seated. I didn't raise my glass. And then, as the clapping died, Emily stood up. No cue. No toast. No announcement. Just silence. She shifted her toddler to her hip and walked to the front, her eyes wide but calm. I wasn't going to say anything, she began, her voice clear and steady. But since we're all being honest today, Drew's head snapped toward her. Emily. She held up a hand. No, you've had your turn. My mother's face paled. I've kept quiet for years, Emily said. Out of guilt. Out of fear. Out of shame, honestly. But seeing Ryan here, I can't pretend anymore. The entire park went still. No birds. No rustling leaves. Just stillness. She turned to the crowd, her voice growing stronger. What Drew did, what they did, was wrong. You all know what happened. Or what you thought happened. You all believed Ryan cheated. Lied. Abandoned me. But none of that was true. Her hand trembled slightly as she adjusted the baby. Drew lied. He showed me fake texts. Fake screenshots. Convinced me that Ryan had another woman. Said he was just trying to protect me. My pulse thundered in my ears. Emily looked at me. And I believed him. Because I was young. Because I thought I owed him something after everything fell apart. And because I trusted the people around me to tell me the truth. Drew stood up fast, panic in his eyes. Emily, sit down. You're upset. I'm not finished. She turned to him. You stole my life. You manipulated everyone. Me, your family, your friends, just to take what your brother had. And you let them believe he was the problem. You let them bury him while you played the victim. Gasps rippled through the tables. A few relatives were visibly uncomfortable. My aunt shifted in her seat. Someone coughed. Emily looked back at me again. I'm sorry. I don't expect forgiveness. But I needed you to know that I see it now. I see you. I should have seen it before. My hands clenched around my glass, but I didn't say a word. My mother stood up, trying to salvage control. All right, that's enough. This isn't the time. Emily rounded on her. You encouraged him. You smiled through it. You told me, after Ryan left, that it was for the best. That he wasn't stable. That Drew would take care of me. Her voice cracked slightly. You sold me on a lie. The baby began to fuss. Emily held him tighter. Drew's face was burning red. You don't know what you're talking about. You were miserable with him. I saved you from making a mistake. You were the mistake, Emily snapped. Then she turned to me, and the weight in her gaze nearly knocked the breath from my chest. I never stopped wondering why you disappeared. Now I know it was the only thing you could do. She stepped down from the stage, her heels clicking softly against the wood. And then she walked straight past Drew, past my mother, who looked like she might collapse, and disappeared into the crowd. No applause followed. No one moved. Drew stood frozen. My mother sat, lips pursed into a pale, trembling line. And me? I stood, calmly, slowly, and without a word, I walked toward the microphone. The microphone was still warm from Emily's hand when I stepped up to it. For a moment, I didn't say anything. I just looked out over the crowd. The same crowd that had once laughed at Drew's jokes about me, nodded along when my mom said I was overly sensitive. The same group that sent me off with silence when I vanished. Now they stared at me, mouths slightly open, unsure whether to brace for an explosion or an apology. I gave them neither. I simply said, I'm not here to clear my name. That would assume I still cared what any of you thought. There was a faint rustle of discomfort. My mom shifted in her seat. Drew took a single step forward and froze when I glanced his way. I just wanted to see, I continued, to see if anything had changed. I scanned the tables. Faces that once filled the background of my childhood. The same people who never once reached out. Not after the breakup. Not after the lies. Not when I vanished. Not until they found out I was worth something. But it hasn't, I said quietly. You still cheer for the loudest voice in the room. Still defend whoever makes you feel most comfortable. And you still mistake performance for character. My voice was steady, but my hands shook slightly. Not with anger, not anymore. With release. I used to think I just wasn't good enough for this family, I added. Turns out I was just too honest. Then I stepped back, placed the microphone gently on the table, and walked away. I didn't wait for a reaction. I didn't care what came next. I just wanted to be gone. I reached my car and paused for a moment before getting in. The polished black hood reflected the sky above, cloudless, endless. I didn't even remember driving there that morning. I didn't remember much at all. Just the weight. The heaviness I'd carried for years. The unanswered questions. The nights I stared at ceilings wondering how people I loved could be so casual about destroying me. The sick feeling in my stomach every time I replayed Emily's face the night she left. The ache of losing her. The ache of losing myself. It all caught up to me then. I sat in the driver's seat, closed the door, and finally exhaled, like I'd been holding my breath since the day I disappeared. The next few days were a blur. I returned to the hotel in a kind of trance. I didn't eat much. Didn't sleep well. I kept replaying the reunion over and over. Emily's speech, my mother's face, Drew's tightening fists. The silence from everyone else. That was the part that lingered the most. The silence. No one stood up. No one defended me. Even after the truth came out, they just sat there. And I realized, maybe I'd never lost a family. Maybe I'd never had one. That thought broke something loose inside me. Not in a violent way. Not in a way that made me want to scream or throw something. But in a way that made everything finally make sense. The next morning, I drove around the old neighborhood. Past my childhood home. The park where Drew broke my nose in a friendly football game, and Mom told me I was being dramatic. The ice cream shop where I once took Emily after our first real fight. The one where she admitted she hated how my family talked down to me. They were ghosts now. Every memory a shadow on pavement. I stopped by the cemetery. My grandfather, the only person in my family who ever made me feel truly seen, was buried there. I hadn't visited in years. I knelt by his grave and spoke out loud, even though no one was around. I think I finally understand what you meant, I whispered. You said sometimes the only way to survive a storm is to walk away from the house that refuses to fix its roof. He used to speak in metaphors. At the time, I thought he was just being poetic. Now I saw it for what it was, a warning. I didn't cry. I just felt empty. The next day, I returned home. My real home. The one I built. Not from nostalgia, not from hand-me-downs, but from grit. From pain. From rebuilding a self they tried to erase. And then I did something I hadn't allowed myself to do in a long, long time. I started planning. Not for revenge. Not yet. But for clarity. I pulled out every record I had. Old messages, timelines, financial records. I started mapping out what had happened in those last few months before I vanished. I didn't know what I was looking for at first. Maybe I just needed to see it all laid out. The betrayal, the manipulation, the way they turned my life upside down while smiling through it. But the more I uncovered, the clearer the patterns became. Emily hadn't just been manipulated emotionally. There were financial threads too. Bank transfers, shifts in ownership. My old apartment lease had been co-signed by Drew at some point. Why? I never added him. The ring I'd bought for Emily? A custom order under my name. But the purchase history showed it had been picked up by someone else. 2 days before she left me. Things weren't just personal. They were calculated. I brought in a friend of mine, a forensic accountant I'd met through one of our angel investors. I asked him to look at a few documents. Casually, no context. Just a situation I'm working through. A week later, he called me back. "Ryan," he said carefully, "you might want to sit down." I already was. He walked me through it. How Drew had used my identity to secure a small loan. How he'd forged a signature on the ring transaction. How someone, likely with access to my personal documents, had attempted to open a joint account in my name and Emily's, days before the breakup. I thanked him, hung up, and stared at the wall for an hour. It was deeper than I thought. It wasn't just a relationship stolen. It was a life hijacked. They didn't just try to ruin me emotionally. They tried to erase me. But they failed. And now? Now I had everything I needed. Not just to heal, but to build the quietest, coldest fire they'd ever feel. Healing isn't linear. That's something I learned slowly. Not in the poetic Instagram quote kind of way, but in the gut-wrenching, sleepless night kind of way. There were days I felt weightless, like the truth had finally set me free. And then there were mornings I woke up clenching my jaw, reliving the betrayal in fragments. Drew's smirk, Emily's disbelief, my mother's chilling indifference. But after the shock wore off, something else took root in its place. Focus. I threw myself into my company like it was oxygen. Every hour became a brick. Every deal, every hire, every product release. A wall between who I used to be and who I was becoming. The world may not have known what my family did to me, but it would damn sure know who I was without them. The startup, which I'll just call Lucent Tech here, had been doing well before. But now it thrived. Maybe it was the clarity. Maybe it was that small ember of rage I let burn just hot enough to keep me sharp. But our growth exploded over the next 18 months. We pivoted our product into something bigger, a platform that automated back-end optimization for small to mid-sized SaaS companies. Doesn't sound sexy, but it was exactly what a dozen struggling startups needed, and we landed 3 major contracts within 6 months. From there, it snowballed. We expanded, hired 20 new people, moved into a sleek downtown office with an open floor plan and high ceilings that made everyone feel a little more powerful than they probably were. But I wasn't just building a company. I was building my own empire. I took courses, met mentors, hired a PR firm, sat on panels, spoke at conferences under my own name. The same name they once dragged through the dirt now appeared in Forbes' 20 entrepreneurs to watch under 30 list. Funny how that works. And with each new milestone, the calls started again. It started small. A text from my dad. "Proud of you, son. Saw the article." I didn't reply. Then an email from my mother. "We're planning another family event. Maybe this time you could make a toast." Nope. But the one that made me stop, really stop, came from Emily. It was short. No subject line. Just one sentence. "Would you ever want to meet him?" I knew who him was. Her son. Drew's son. The child I'd once imagined might have been mine, in another life, before all of this. I didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, I looked at the message and asked myself a question I hadn't considered in years. What do I want? Not what do I need? Not what would make them hurt? Not what justice looks like? But me. What do I want after all of this? And the answer was simple. Peace. But peace, for me, would never come from forgiveness. Not until the scales were balanced. And I was finally in a position to do that. See, one of the benefits of building a tech company from scratch is that you become very good at research, at tracking, at noticing details most people overlook. Like how my brother's house was technically under my mother's name now, a transfer likely done to avoid creditors. Or how he'd tried to launch his own app with a shoddy dev team from overseas, only for it to flop within 3 months. Or how Emily had filed for legal separation, A quiet document buried in county records, barely noticed by anyone, but enough to tell me their house wasn't a happy one. And most interesting of all, Drew had applied for a job at a company we'd recently acquired. He didn't know I owned it. Of course he didn't. It was one of 6 under an umbrella firm I created for tax purposes. No one saw my name on the paperwork, not unless I wanted them to. His resume landed on my desk by pure coincidence, or fate, depending on how you look at things. And when I saw his cover letter, I laughed for the first time in weeks. Experienced in project leadership and brand management, with a strong track record in cross-functional collaboration and public speaking. He was applying to be a product lead at my company, in my empire. I sat with that for a while, and then I made a decision. Not just about him, about all of them. It was time, not for an explosion, not for a public takedown, but for something far colder, more surgical, something that didn't look like revenge, but would feel like it every day. I called my lawyer. We discussed this plan months ago, back when I first showed him the forged documents. He'd called it nuclear level leverage. I told him to start the paperwork. Then I sent an email, just 3 lines, to Drew, from a private address he wouldn't recognize. We've reviewed your application. We'd like to invite you to a final interview. Bring your A game. Then I sat back and waited. Power isn't loud. It's patient. And mine was just beginning to speak. The email had been sent on a Thursday. By Friday afternoon, Drew responded, faster than I expected and more eagerly than I'd imagined. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I've done extensive research on your company, and I'm confident I can bring fresh value to your product team. I'm available to meet next week, any day, anytime. There it was again, that old Drew confidence. That greasy, unshakable arrogance dressed up as charm. I could almost hear his voice reading the words, see the smirk curling at the edge of his lips as he imagined acing the interview and climbing back to relevance through someone else's success. Just like he always had. I passed the email to my assistant and told her to schedule the interview for Wednesday at our newest branch, a converted loft space downtown that doubled as our innovation lab and development satellite. It was sleek, intimidating, and entirely disconnected from any press we'd done. No signage, no names, just a minimalist building with frosted glass and a quiet security system that would log every movement from the moment he walked in. I had it staged perfectly. Meanwhile, my lawyer called with an update. Everything's in place, he said, his tone cool and precise. We can initiate a formal inquiry if you're ready. The forgery charges will stick. You've got the purchase receipts, witness statements, and digital logs. Same with the fraudulent loan. He'll panic the second he gets that first letter. I didn't say anything right away. I just stood at the window of my office, looking out over the city skyline, the low hum of traffic rising like static. Not yet, I said finally. I want to give him a chance to see it with his own eyes first. I want him to realize who he tried to steal from. Understood, the lawyer replied. But you know the moment we trigger this, it's going to get messy. I smiled faintly. That's fine. I've spent the last 5 years cleaning up their mess. One more round won't break me. Once that call ended, I turned to the next phase, learning just how deep Drew's spiral went. I hired a private investigator. Not for dirt, necessarily. I didn't need scandal. I needed specifics. And the report that came back within a week was illuminating. Drew and Emily had been living in a house they couldn't afford, one that had been kept afloat with a series of gifts from my mother, pulled from the last vestiges of a retirement fund my father had quietly built. Emily, after filing for separation, had moved into a small apartment across town. She'd left most of her belongings behind. Their son, Caleb, stayed with her, and based on the PI's observation logs, Drew hadn't made much effort to visit. Worse, Drew had been applying to dozens of companies. Every rejection seemed to hit harder than the last. He'd cashed out a small 401k to pay off a credit card. He was selling things online, a TV, a mountain bike, even his old college letterman jacket. He was desperate, and desperate men made mistakes. I called in a favor from someone in our recruitment team. I didn't need Drew to pass any initial screenings, but I did want the interview panel to treat him like a serious candidate. I wanted the illusion to last. Be neutral, I told them. Ask him tough questions. Make him sweat a little. But don't let on who's behind this. Not yet. When Wednesday arrived, I dressed with care, not in a flashy way, but with unmistakable polish. Dark blazer, open collar, watch worth more than Drew's monthly rent, tucked neatly under the cuff. I arrived early and waited in the observation room behind a two-way glass wall, sipping black coffee as I watched him walk in. He looked different, older, not in a mature way, in a hollowed-out way. His eyes had lost their gleam. His posture, once annoyingly proud, sagged slightly at the edges. He wore a cheap blazer that didn't quite fit, and his handshake with the recruiter was a little too firm, like he was trying to assert control he didn't really have. Still, he talked, and talked, and talked. He spun stories, boasted about brand leadership experience and project execution, half of which I knew were lies. He threw in buzzwords like synergy and scalability and claimed credit for projects I knew he hadn't touched. At one point, he even mentioned my old app, the prototype Emily and I had designed in college, and claimed he consulted during early development. That made me laugh out loud behind the glass. When the interview was over, I told the team to stall him for 15 minutes. Just long enough for me to slip into the corner office upstairs, the one with my name etched subtly on the glass. I didn't usually work from this location, but today was a special occasion. 15 minutes later, there was a knock. "Come in," I called. Drew entered, a little flushed from the heat, carrying a fake leather folder with copies of his resume inside. And then he saw me. He stopped, dead in his tracks. He didn't say a word, just stared. I waited 3 beats, then leaned back in my chair and gave him a small, slow smile. "Hey, Drew," I said. "Long time." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. His throat bobbed as he swallowed. I didn't realize." "No," I cut in. "I'm sure you didn't." A heavy pause settled in the air like fog. I let it stretch, let him sit in the realization. I didn't come here to gloat. I lied calmly. "This isn't about revenge. This is about closure." His lips parted. "Ryan, listen, man, I know things got messy back then, but I was trying to protect Emily. I thought you were. Save it." I stood up, slow and deliberate. "You weren't protecting anyone. You lied. You forged documents. You poisoned my relationship, stole my ring, my lease, my name. And then you wore my life like a coat that didn't fit." He paled. "That's not. You know what the difference between us is?" I stepped closer. "You've spent your whole life needing applause. I just needed time. And you gave it to me. 5 years of silence. 5 years to build something you'll never touch." He looked like he wanted to run, but he didn't move. I reached into the desk drawer and pulled out a folder. Inside was a copy of the forged lease, a transaction record from the jewelry store, a printed email where he'd pretended to be me. I slid it across the table. "I have the originals, and the legal team, and the funds to drag this through every court in the state." He stared at it without touching it. "But I'm not going to do that," I added. His head snapped up. "Because that would make you the center of the story again. And frankly, you're not worth the ink." Another beat of silence. Then I turned away and said, "You can see yourself out." And I let him walk. No guards, no threats, no security escort, just silence. Because what came next wasn't going to be loud. It was going to be devastating. He left without saying a word. Not a stammered excuse. Not a fake apology. Nothing. Just a pale, shell-shocked expression as he backed out of the office and closed the door with a soft click, like he was afraid to wake a sleeping beast. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. The look on his face told me everything I'd hoped for. Realization, regret, and a dawning fear that maybe, just maybe, the brother he thought he buried hadn't just survived, but had come back wearing armor. Still, that wasn't the revenge. That was just the opening act. The real show began the next morning. At precisely 9 a.m., Drew received a letter from my legal team. Not a full lawsuit, not yet, but a formal notice of investigation into forgery and identity theft, citing specific dates, transaction logs, and witness statements. It was worded professionally, but between the lines, the message was clear. "We see what you did. We can prove it. And we're ready to bury you with it." I knew Drew well enough to predict his next move, denial, followed by panic. Then desperate calls to our mother, to anyone he thought might shield him. And sure enough, by noon, my mom was blowing up my inbox with subject lines like, "Please call me. This has gone too far." And my personal favorite, "You're still family." I didn't reply, because the next phase of the plan was already in motion, the part where I didn't just level the playing field. I took it. Remember the house Drew was living in? The one technically under my mother's name? Yeah, that was intentional. Because 2 years ago, when I caught wind that she was funneling money to him, retirement funds, credit lines, even refinancing the lake house my grandfather left her, I stepped in behind the scenes. Quietly, legally, and with a polite offer she never understood the full scope of. A family friend, acting as a wealth advisor, approached her with an opportunity to consolidate her debts and free up some cash flow. She bit. The terms were generous. She signed. And just like that, half the deed to the home became part of a trust. My trust. She never realized I was behind it. Never asked who the silent partner was. Why would she? She thought I was still off somewhere licking my wounds, not orchestrating her undoing. And now, with Drew teetering and the threat of legal fallout looming over his head, I decided to make my move. A second letter was sent, this time from the trust's legal counsel, informing the co-owners, my mother and me, that due to a defaulted clause in the agreement, a motion would be filed to liquidate the property unless the outstanding debt was resolved. There was no way they could pay it off. I'd made sure of that. But even that wasn't the finishing blow. That came through Emily. I hadn't contacted her since the reunion. I wasn't sure I ever would. But when the time came, I sent her a single message. If you'd like full custody, I can help. She responded within an hour. We met at a quiet cafe halfway between our cities. She looked different, tired, but clearer, like someone who'd finally surfaced after nearly drowning. I don't want money, she said first. If that's what this is. It's not, I replied. I want nothing from you. She nodded slowly. Then why? I sipped my coffee. Because you're the only one who said the truth out loud. And because that kid deserves better than a father who treats people like toys. Her eyes glistened for a second, but she didn't cry. Tell me what I need to do, she said. And I did. I gave her everything. Legal connections, financial backing, character references from people in Drew's own failed business ventures who were more than happy to talk about his impulsive behavior, verbal abuse, and negligence. My lawyer drafted a quiet agreement offering Emily enough support to stabilize her and Caleb long-term. No ties, no strings, no loopholes. Just a clean break. 2 months later, the custody hearing came and went. Drew showed up alone, unprepared, unrepresented. Emily left with full custody and a reinforced legal barrier that prevented Drew from accessing Caleb without court approval. Then came the final stroke. The local newspaper, small but respected, ran a profile on Lucent Tech and its founder. A glowing feature, full-page photo, quotes about resilience and redemption. And right there in the sidebar, a little mention of an old betrayal, legal action, and how personal loss fueled a now multi-million-dollar venture. The name Drew Bennett wasn't in the article, but everyone knew, especially in our town. I didn't write the article, but I approved every line. The fallout was slow and thorough. Friends stopped returning Drew's calls. The small businesses that once trusted him with side work distanced themselves. My mother, realizing the house was no longer salvageable, quietly put it up for sale. The asking price was low, the interest even lower. Her reputation, once polished and proud, now came with a bitter aftertaste. And me? I stayed quiet. Because revenge, real revenge, isn't loud. It's not a dramatic speech or a final showdown. It's watching someone realize, in the stillness of their own ruin, that the person they discarded is the one holding every string. It's letting them hear the echo of your silence in every locked door, every severed tie, every opportunity that slips through their fingers. It's being the ghost they thought was gone, until the day they realize you've been watching the whole time. And I wasn't finished yet. The house sold for half of what it was worth. My mother moved into a cramped 2-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of town, far from the neighborhood where she'd once hosted garden parties and proudly told anyone who'd listened that her boys were doing so well. The shame didn't hit her all at once. It chipped away slowly, in grocery aisles where old friends didn't wave, in whispered conversations behind her back, in the pitying glances from the church group that stopped inviting her to luncheons. She tried calling me. Once. I didn't pick up. She left a voicemail, her voice thin and brittle. Ryan, please. We're still family. But she'd already taught me what family meant to her. And I remembered. I remembered when she sat across from me, stone-faced, telling me Emily was never meant for me. I remembered how she let Drew lie, watched him poison my life, and still smiled through it. I remembered how, when I was gone, she didn't wonder if I was okay, only how to spin the story. And now? She had no story left to tell. Drew, on the other hand, did what Drew always did. He ran. After losing custody, after the article, after the house was sold, he tried to disappear into another city, another job, another identity. But the digital world didn't forget. Employers Googled him. Background checks lit up red flags. His resume was flagged for inconsistencies. He started freelancing, underpaying himself just to get a foot in the door, but even those doors closed fast. One night, James, my old college roommate, sent me a screenshot. Drew had started a GoFundMe. The caption read, "Trying to rebuild for my son. Life threw me some unfair curveballs." No mention of Emily, or me, or the truth. I didn't donate. Neither did anyone else. It stayed at $75. 3 weeks in. Emily, meanwhile, thrived. She found a job working with a local nonprofit that supported single mothers and young families. I got a card from her one day, just a plain envelope with a crayon drawing inside from Caleb. No message, no signature, just a little stick figure with spiky hair and a lopsided smile, holding hands with a taller one in a suit. I kept it pinned to my fridge, not because I needed to remember who I was to them, but to remind myself of who I had become despite them. I didn't speak about the past often, not to the press, not to my partners, not to the people who worked beside me every day, because revenge wasn't my origin story. It was just the footnote. The real story was the rebuilding, the becoming, the fact that I walked away with nothing but a suitcase and returned with a name that carried weight. My mother used to say, "You'll regret walking away from your family." But here's what she never understood. I didn't walk away from family. I walked away from people who called themselves family, but only ever treated me like a backup plan. And I never looked back. Not until the reunion. Not until I pulled up in a $200,000 car, stepped out in a suit worth more than Drew's last paycheck, and watched from the hilltop as they arrived late, huddled and sweating, because their rusted minivan had broken down 2 blocks away. They limped into the gathering while I stood under the shade, glass in hand, watching them scan the crowd, watching them look for me, and realizing I wasn't standing in their shadow anymore. They were standing in mine.